In this world, cultivators practicing the path of literary Tao are highly valued. After all, these masters can transform the images captured only on the pages of books into yang. A single word from a powerful master of the path of literature could defeat an army of 10,000, and one stroke of their pen can secure the whole world. In this world, knowledge is the ultimate power. But suddenly the older kids started yelling that the library was on fire. We have to take out the hard disk that holds all the books in the library. But the strong-spirited guy answered them that he would give it a try. The guy's name is Li Chang'an, and he was an ordinary employee of the National Library of China until, under completely inexplicable circumstances, he came into this world. And speaking of which, the entire archive of the library where he worked was transferred with him. So now he had all kinds of ancient and modern books on his hands. A guy came up to someone and said his name was Li and he wanted to take part in the county exam next year. Li thought that with his cheater system, he could easily become at least a high-ranking official and at most the new emperor. However, it was not so simple. He was reborn in the body of an ordinary poor man. Because of this deplorable condition, other problems appeared. For example, his younger sister of the fiancé of the older brother of the previous owner of the body sold to the house of hundreds of flavors, and the bride herself is trying to be abused. Finding himself in such a predicament, the first thing Li did was to make his fortune by relying on the knowledge of his system. Li told me that he learned this art of wine making from a very ancient book. Now he can make beautiful wine. One thing he realized was that the people of the ancient era simply couldn't resist modern technology. The man, after tasting the wine, started shouting that the wine has such a clean and mild flavor. This wine is so refreshing. And he felt like he was 20 years younger. And after that, Li decided that he would first make his fortune and then think about cultivation. And as he began to train, he began to say that Li was going after their souls. After that, as Li said, he would try to get the hard drive. Finding it, he had no idea it would end like this. Hearing strange noises, he decided to turn around, and suddenly saw a large iron flying at him. But abruptly jumping out of bed because of this situation, he didn't understand how this could have happened. Looking around, he asked where was he? After all, he had just been in the middle of a fire. And why was he wearing those strange country clothes? But suddenly there was a strange sound, and a scroll appeared. The scroll welcomed him to a world where the path of literary Tao was valued. Since the time of Confucius, this world has taken a completely different path from its original world. Therefore, great poets and lyricists such as Chao, Ji, Bai Fu or Su Dongpa have never existed here. Li looked at it, and didn't realize that he had moved to another world. The scroll said that Confucius once created a 6-book book, recruiting his disciples, and opened the path of literary Tao for the first time in this world, which later spread to thousands of li. Thus Confucius became the first saint among men. Later his disciples, Yan Hui, Meng Zi, Zhuang Zi, Dong Zhongshi and Sima Qian inherited the teachings of Confucius' way of literature and also rose to sainthood to stand up for this world. All the people of this world since the time of Confucius had begun to revere the path of the literary Tao and considered martial arts too crude. Li now realized in his head that he was in the world of cultivators. The scroll replied that this was correct. In this world, they are called reciters or masters of the path of literature. People who cultivate the path of literature open the palace of literature within themselves. The 9th stage of the master of the path of literary Tao, fluent reading. It greatly strengthens the body and gives ease of movement. The 8th stage of the master of the path of literary Tao, the unification of writing and body. The words of such masters become a very powerful incantation. The 7th stage of the master of the path of literary Tao, writing is like a blade. A master of this level becomes a warrior capable of striking with a single word. In this world, people who are not lacking talent in the field of literature are like the owners of Ma Liang's magic brush. They could destroy an army of 10,000 with a single word. And one stroke of their pen could bring prosperity back to the world. The scroll called Li Master, and said that from now on it would be his system. Now he would be able to request information from the archives of the National Library at any time, and now he could touch it to have the memories of the previous owner of that body come back to him. Li smiled and said that it turns out, that hard disk became his system. And in this world, cultivators of the path of literature are most valued, and he has an archive that contains the works of the brilliant writers of antiquity. Li thought and said, it turns out that he has everything to climb to the top of this world. Immediately closing the scroll, he felt the strongest cultivation power, and in a moment Li said he remembered everything. Remembered the life of the previous owner of this body. But suddenly Lu Jin, the fiancé of Li's older brother, walked in. On the second day after the wedding, her husband had gone to fight on the border and had not heard from him for 5 years. When she entered the room, she asked if the elder brother was awake. Li was very surprised to see his big sister in front of him. Lu said that this time he was so sick that he had been unconscious for 3 days, and he must be really hungry. Careful, the food is still hot. Li took the food and thanked his sister for being so respectful. Li suddenly looked at the plate and was surprised. Lu said that their wine didn't sell at all, and all the money left over went to medicinal herbs and porridge for him. Li asked his sister if she had eaten. Lu looked away sharply and said she had eaten. Li immediately understood and said that there should be no secrets between family members. He immediately divided the food into 2 plates and offered to eat together. Lu accepted such a courtesy, greatly rejoiced, and replied that she would be very grateful. Li asked his sister where is Junior Lin Long. Lu replied that she had returned to their mother's house. Li saw that something was wrong and told his sister that he had a lung disease, not a head disease. Let her tell the truth. Lu ventured and replied that she had sold herself to the house of 100 flavors to raise money for medicinal herbs for him. Li was surprised and said it was a brothel. You can't do that, even if it's so serious. Li decided to follow her, but as he got to his feet he couldn't keep up and fell. Lu asked him where he was going. Li replied that he had to free the younger Ling Long. Lu said that the people of the 100 Flavors house made a condition to her. They said she must bring them 300 taels of silver by the end of the month. Otherwise, Lin Luan would start serving customers. But with their state of affairs, it just wasn't possible. Li put his hand on his sister and told her not to worry. He will surely figure out a way to get their little sister back. She won't get hurt, he promises her. Li went out to the barn and knew one thing: Li's family was in the wine business. When things were going well, first my father and elder brother went to the Vionu, and afterwards sickness struck him. Since then things have been on the decline. So now Li decided to take matters into his own hands and thought he should taste the flavor. Li tasted it and said it had a lot of impurities and the flavor was a little weak. It's not the best quality wine. At this rate, they won't be able to accumulate 300 taels of silver before the end of the month. But that's if they don't use the system. Li turned to Scroll and told him to show him the way to make aragatu. But suddenly, he heard strange sounds outside and realized it was his big sister's voice. At that time, Lu was attacked by a man and harassed. He asked her not to break down. And why is she messing around with this deadbeat? He's on death's doorstep. Let her just go with him. Lu yelled at Go to let her go. But then Li ran out and told the man to get away from her. Li lost his temper completely, and calling the man a bastard once again ordered him to let his sister go. Wanago was Lu's neighbor and was engaged in wine making. He asked Lu what he was doing. Li told Go that he's warning him now. If he doesn't get out now, all his wine jugs will break. He doesn't want to go bankrupt, does he? Go didn't take any chances and said he was leaving. But he'll still have her when he's finally dead. Lu told his brother that he is a smart guy. Why did he insult this man? Li replied that such people don't understand in a nice way. Lu was surprised and cried. Li told her not to worry about it. This man couldn't hurt her, he would take care of it. Li said he would protect her from now on. No one else would dare to bully her or him. As for the younger Luan, he had already figured out how they could earn those 300 taels of silver. So Li asked Lu to come with him, and told her that he had learned this art of winemaking from a very ancient book. Now he could make beautiful wine. Lu tasted it, and immediately realized that it was the best wine she had seen in all of Lin County. Even a non-drinker like her wouldn't be able to refuse a single sip. And it seems they really can save Luan. Lu couldn't contain her emotions and hugged her brother. Li was surprised and asked what was wrong with her. Lu told his brother that he was amazing. She doesn't even know how to thank him. Li replied that she didn't need to, they were family after all. Li said time is running out, we need to get to selling soon. He went to the market and started shouting that they were selling wine. Lu approached one of the passers-by and asked him if he would like to try the Li family's new wine. The guy was surprised when he heard from the Li family, and immediately said no. Lu asked the guy not to leave, because this is a new wine. It's completely different. But the guy still refused. Lu turned to his brother and said that they'd been sitting here all morning but hadn't sold a single jug. Maybe they should lower the price. Li immediately realized his mistake, for he hadn't considered that the reputation of their family's wine would turn out to be so bad. So he replied to his sister that they would lower the price a little. But then Go came up to them and asked them hatefully, "Can one jug of wine be sold for 20 coins? He wouldn't drink their wine for nothing, and they're charging money for it? They could just pour it out." Lu was very scared when she saw the man and turned to her brother. Li answered her not to be afraid, he was with her. Go approached Li and asked him why he should not sell his winery along with his eldest. "Here's a couple of coins for him, maybe he'll last another week on medicine." Gua immediately grabbed Lu's hand and promised the guy that he would take care of his big sister properly. Li immediately turned into a monster and said he was a dead man. And immediately he hit him over the head with his jug. Go started insulting him and said that he had attacked him in the wine market area. He will report this to Mr. Qing Tian. Li said the jug just slipped from his hands and fell on his stupid head, he had nothing to do with it. He doesn't have any proof. Go asked the guy, is he a complete idiot or not? All the people here saw him hit him on the head. Li replied to him that he started the altercation himself. He was just answering him. Go said he was only telling him the truth. His wine is really disgusting. But people started to wonder about the smell. And one of the crowd said that the smell came from the broken jug of the Li family. The guard turned to Go and said that it seemed their wine had become more flavorful. The man started to smell it too and realized that he could smell it too. People started asking the guys, is this their wine? Could they taste it? This is the first time they meet such an alluring aroma of wine. Li realized immediately that, to his surprise, the smell of wine had attracted people's attention. He immediately asked his sister to bring another jug of wine. Li started pouring into glasses and telling people to come over and try it. This is the ergative variety brewed by the Li family. After tasting such a wine, they started shouting that it was the most delicious wine they had ever tasted. People immediately started saying that they would buy 1 and 2 jugs at a time. At this time, Go was looking at all of this and was greatly embittered. Suddenly, a customer approached Lu and she asked him how many jugs of wine he wished to order. The guy asked, "Is it Li family wine?" Li approached them and told the customer not to worry, they guaranteed the quality of their wine. The guy tasted it and said he would order 10 jin of their wine. But if tomorrow's batch is not of the same quality, he will never buy their wine again. And he'll tell everyone he knows too. Li listened to the buyer's terms and thanked for such a large order. And tomorrow all the jugs will be here. Go heard all this and thought he would let Li steal his customers away like this. No way. He would make sure they couldn't sell a drop of their crappy wine tomorrow. The next day, Li came out to give pictures and told the customer that his order was ready. The customer was surprised and said they were so fast. But suddenly, out of the blue, someone behind them shouted for them to wait. Go turned to the customer and said that he had ordered 50 jin of wine from him yesterday, and let him see, he had already delivered them, and on top of that he prepared a couple extra jin. You don't even have to pay for the extra ones. The guy thought for a long time and replied that he understood. But he said that in there and they don't drink more than 60 jin of wine a day. Go told the guy to return the wine to him then. What if it's bad? That would really hurt his business. And he knows his wine is good. Li immediately heard about the extra genie, so it's a slander on nothing. That bastard Go is trying to hurt everyone. Li decided to play it differently, and using magic said Confucius said he doesn't know what a man who can't be trusted is good for. If a guy so easily reneges on his word, he can never be known in society as a decent person. After all, one word of a man can be worth thousands of gold pieces. Immediately, the buyer changed his mind and said that he would buy everything. After all, Li had embarrassed them. Li was surprised and realized that in this world, literature really does have incredible power. But all of a sudden some man said the guys said what was very well said and started clapping. While the guys came to their senses, Zhang Fugui, the owner of the Zhang family, and said that he did not expect to meet such a talented young man here. It's a pity he's just an ordinary winemaker. Li introduced himself to him and told him that he wanted to sit for the county exam next year. Fugui was surprised and said, "What ambition?" and immediately told the guy to hand it over. And since his employee had already ordered 10 jin of wine from him, they must pay for it. And it doesn't matter what quality it is. You have to keep your word. Go told the owner that their employee had too good a heart. That's why he couldn't say no to this Li guy. Although everyone knows that the Li family's wine is disgusting, he will prepare 60 jin of high-quality wine for there and tomorrow. Li told Go that whether it was disgusting or not could only be known by tasting it. He suggested to Mr. Zhang that he compare his wine and Go's wine, and if his wine turns out to be better, then Go will never again defame his family's honor. Go realized that Li was an idiot, because he was digging his own grave. There's no way he's going to believe that he learned how to make good wine overnight. Go agreed and said that if his wine won, Li and his family would no longer be able to sell wine in Lian County. The guy was so confident that he immediately agreed. Having arranged the tasting, and Fugui said he gave them his word that he would give a fair verdict, and took the first taste of Go's wine. Fugui tasted the wine and said it was free of impurities, but there was a slight stickiness in the mouth. The quality is above average, but it was also time for Li's wine, and after tasting it he started saying that it has such a clean and smooth flavor. This wine is so refreshing. Fugui realized that this wine was just fine. He felt as if he had been rejuvenated for 20 years. He had a sudden urge to run along the seashore and let off all the steam he had accumulated. Fugui told the guy that he has a very fine wine. And great quality too. Go was surprised and asked how is that possible. Fugui told Li that from this day forward, only they would supply wine to his inn. Would they be able to brew 60 jin a day? Li agreed and told the master that he didn't have to worry about it. In his head, he realized that things had worked out even better than he had anticipated. He was only hoping to stop that bastard Go, and he was suddenly offered a long-term partnership. The first step has been taken. At that time, in an orchard in the suburbs, the boys were picking fruit from the trees and selling it at once. The seller saw Li and asked him what kind of fruit he wanted. Li walked over and asked the vendor why he didn't have hawthorn berries. The guy replied that it was too sour, and it made his mouth water. No one would buy 1 jin even for a couple of coins. They have a few bushes growing here, and they are the only ones in the whole county. He can pick a few jin for it, give it away for free. It's not for sale anyway. Li was surprised at his words and realized that no one in this world had ever tasted hawthorn and sugar caramel before. Even though their wine has started to sell well, the brewing process is time-consuming. He can make a nice profit on sweets in between winemaking. The vendor asked the gentleman if he needed hawthorn. Li came to his senses and replied that he did. He said he needed all the hawthorn they had. Li came home and went straight into the preparation and said to start by removing the seeds, then putting them on sticks and covering them with caramelized sugar. He got the method of making this sweet from an old book. And it's called berries and sugar caramel. If they start selling well, they could earn at least 100 taels of silver in literally 5 days. Lu was surprised and asked her brother, "Are these berries really that good?" Li replied that she would know when she tasted them. Let her have some. Lu bit one side and said the outside was crispy and the caramel itself literally melts in your mouth. And the sourness of the berries compensates for the excessive sweetness of the caramel. The result is an excellent flavor that has already spread throughout her body. Lu told her brother that it was really delicious. Li replied that he was glad she liked it. Li thought and asked his sister if she could start selling sweets today. The sooner they started, the sooner they would raise the necessary amount of money. Lu immediately agreed. Toward evening, the girls came to the market and started yelling that they were selling sugar caramelized berries. And they might not even pay if they didn't like it. And then one of the guys came up and said it was the first time he'd ever heard of it. And now he's gonna buy everything from her. But one of the girls asked, why should everything go to him? Let mistress leave her a couple. Lu replied that they shouldn't worry, there was enough for everyone. And after a while, she saw that she had everything procured. She told the younger Lan and Fan that this was their payment for today's work. And she hoped they could sell more tomorrow. Lan was surprised and asked Lu, does she think they are coming tomorrow? It's just hawthorn berries and sugar. They'll start selling them themselves tomorrow and make a lot of money. Lu was surprised and replied to them that they couldn't do that. But suddenly Li came and said that he thanked them for today's work, the payment they had given, so they could leave. Lu told her brother to forgive her, it was all her fault. She didn't expect them to do that. Li replied that it wasn't that surprising, there was nothing complicated about making this candy. He knew that there would be people who would steal their idea. Li asked his sister, "What is the most important thing about making hawthorn berries and sugar caramel?" Lu thought for a moment, and replied that hawthorn and sugar itself. Li said that the sale of sugar is controlled by the authorities, but the sale of hawthorn is not. The next morning, the girls went to the garden and told the vendors to give them 10 jean of hawthorn. The seller replied that he didn't have any, he had sold all the hawthorn bushes in Lin County to that guy. Let them buy from him. And then Li set down his baskets of hawthorn and was telling the girls that everything was right. The girls started to argue over the price, because jean used to cost only 2 coins. "It's too expensive," Lu asked her brother that he had known from the beginning that this was going to happen. Li replied that he had. "The sweets sell well, of course, but it's too time-consuming. It's easier to just sell all the hawthorn and make a lot of money at once." Li told his sister that she would soon see that soon they would only have silver in their hands, and things would get better very quickly. Unexpectedly, a few days later, in front of the Star Palace, a very large number of residents gathered at the East Gate. The girl asked, "What do you get? This is where the County Poetry Festival will be held." "How many people?" The second girl replied that that was correct. "They say that this year he will be evaluated by the Academy director himself. If he sees someone, he will have a bright future ahead of him. A better poem might even make it to the Wanchang Monument." He had also heard that only by invitation could he get there. The head of education in Guweidao County. He told his grandson that it's not like that, there is another way. He could become a member if he passed Elder Gu's test. The boy replied that it wasn't as easy as it sounded. Already 10 people had fallen through. At this time in the crowd, Lu was asking people to let them pass. Li told his sister that they didn't have to go there. He's not really interested in this poetry festival. Right now, he wants to concentrate on saving the younger Linglong, and then he will start preparing for the county exam, which will be held in March. Lu replied that no. He is a very talented young man. He should at least give it a try. But suddenly someone pushed her, and she fell on her brother. Li saw this and told the guy to be careful. He asked who the guy was? And why did he push her on purpose? The guy replied that he just didn't like it when beggars who had learned a couple of hieroglyphics started to think that they could achieve something. Don't even think about it. The other guy looked closer and said, "That's Li, the wine salesman. Does he sell wine in the morning and write poetry at night?" And Li is a lowlife. He is not allowed to even think he can stand next to educated people. Lu asked his brother for forgiveness. After all, she was the one who brought him here and now he has to put up with all of this. Li told his sister that it wasn't the least bit her fault. After all, she just wanted what was best for her. Let her not judge war heroes and educated people by their origins. Had she not heard of such a saying? They come from humble families, they may be as well read as they are, children with silver spoons in their mouths. But all of a sudden, a murmur gathered in the crowd. Gu realized that this skinny guy had a sense of dignity. That's commendable. But then Gu came out and addressed the people and told them to listen to him. The people immediately fell silent. Gu said that since either side was able to convince the other, it is possible to solve the issue in another way. The boy replied to Elder Gu that he agreed. He would really like to show him his talent. Just then, Lu came out and said that he was also participating. Gu replied that these lines were prepared to test those who wanted to participate in the festival. He thought they would be perfect to settle their dispute, and the winner will be the one who completes the most quatrains in 20 breaths. The winner will also be rewarded with the opportunity to participate in the Star Palace Festival. Gu turned to the contestants and said they could begin. Lu watched and realized that it was not going to be easy. Lu said that the closing lines should have the right number of characters. The parts of speech should match the first part. So you also have to stick to the same syntax. Li realized at this point that it would be difficult. If he didn't have the entire National Library at his fingertips. Li walked over to the boy and picked up the brush. People said they didn't think Li could do this. And this rich boy hasn't written a single line yet. Lu immediately got down to business and started writing his own poems, which he can read from books. Gu looked at this creation and saw that this young man is truly extraordinary. He has great potential. The other one, on the other hand, is going very badly. Li asked the guy if he was going to pee or not. If nothing comes to mind, then let him just step back. The guy replied that no, he remembered and would write now. Lee immediately pushed him and continued writing, saying that the rustling of the bamboo was due to the wind of the ocean. The guy fell to his knees and said that he had lost. People started shouting that Lee was the winner, but suddenly the light on the paper began to glow, and became golden. Lu asked, "What is this?" "It's Lee's monument," Monument said, for the guy to climb to the top of the Star Palace and compose one poem. Lee saw that this is what it is like. A world where the way of the literary Tao reigns supreme. Gu said that since the beginning of the poetry festival has already been submitted, he's asking him to go to the palace. He will look forward to his poem. Lee thanked the elder and suggested to Lu that she come with him. He immediately took her hand and ran along with her. People said that this kid's talent for composing couplets surpasses his. He is sure he still has something to surprise them, the guy said, right? He had studied hard for 10 years and practiced it constantly, but even so he could not complete 5 couplets in the time of 18 breaths. The eldest daughter of the Ananchi family laughed, and said that finally there was at least someone more or less interesting. He was already tired of listening to these idiots all evening. Going upstairs, Lu suddenly let go of her brother's hand. Lee asked his sister, "What's wrong?" Lu replied that she just wanted to enjoy the view for a while. She never thought she would one day be able to enter the Palace of Stars. Lee told his sister that this was just the beginning. In the future, he would be able to take her wherever she wanted to go. Lu replied to her brother that she had faith in him. "But has he thought about the poem yet?" "It's quiet enough here, she thinks it will be easier for him to concentrate." Lee replied that he didn't want her to worry about it, he already had a couple of ideas. He wouldn't promise first place, but the prize was definitely his. He realized that he had a theme of ascension. Wang Zhuhuang's poem was perfect. But suddenly, a shiver went through his body. Lu wondered what was happening to him. It felt like something was trying to escape from his body. Lee asked his brother if everything was okay. And from his body, a voice told the guy to go up the Stork Tower. Lee realized that this ordinary edition of couplets had no response. However, now, the world of the path of literary Tao had responded to his poem, and suddenly the trophy said that the condition of the literary Tao path world was fulfilled. People said that the monument had changed again. Something incredible was coming. The guys said that if you consider this reaction of the monument, the person causing it must have an extraordinary talent. Nanji said she had to find him right away. She realized that someone who could remove the shackles from her body had appeared in the Star Palace. The owner of Xiantian's body. Nanji told the others to follow the light of the monument. It should be inside the Star Palace. Lee realized that he had no position or money right now. In this state, he simply wouldn't be able to protect himself and his family. He couldn't let anyone find out about his talent now. It would cause unnecessary envy and dump a bunch of dangers on his head. He only realized one thing, that this verse must not make it to the Wenchang monument. Lee started shouting for the energy to open up finally, but it turned out to be much more complicated than that. Suddenly Lu grabbed him while he was falling and yelled for someone to help them. Lee told his sister not to yell. Better have her close the door and make sure no one comes in here. Lu was very frightened and replied that she would do it now. Lee realized that if the power of that poem lingered in him for a couple more minutes, his body would simply be torn to shreds. He would no longer have time to get out of here. Lee took the chalk in his hands and said he needed to splash it out. And he started writing on the blackboard. But things were getting worse. He tried to write something, but his soul was tearing badly and secreting blood. Lee wrote a poem and said it was finally over. Immediately, a golden scroll appeared. Lu, when she saw her brother was okay, ran up and said she was really scared. She was so happy that he was okay. Lee replied that she shouldn't worry, it was already over, and suggested that she go home. After arriving home, Lee decided to look at his cultivation and tidy him up a bit. Lee said that to his surprise, the chi paths of literature not only did not destroy his body, but also strengthened his spiritual meridians. Now his sick body was finally beginning to get better. Lu knocked unexpectedly and said that her brother was looking for the owner of the orchard. At that time, Guy came to Lee's house with a box in his hands. Opening it, she saw a silver figure. He said it was simply amazing. He would never have thought that someone could sell sour hawthorn berries and earn 150 taels of silver at a time. Lu was very surprised at this point, and said that there were so many of them. Lee took the money and replied that he was just lucky. It's nothing like that. And let the guy take this too, it's a tip for them. And the hawthorn bushes are also theirs again. Let them sell the next batch themselves. The guy was surprised and asked, Really? It's a very profitable business. Does he really want to give them to him? Lee told owner Tan not to worry about him, he would take care of himself. Tang thanked him for such an honor, and replied that he would definitely repay him for it in the future. And then Lu wanted to say something to her brother. But Lee interrupted her, and said that he knew what she wanted to ask. Lee told his sister that all the same, the sugar caramelized hawthorn berries were finished. The process of creating the caramel is a little different, of course, but the overall flavor is about the same with other benches. He thinks quite a few peddlers have already planted as many hawthorn bushes as possible, so next year they won't have any advantage. Lu said they were still short of the money to buy out her little sister, with as much as half of it left. Did the brother have another idea? Lee smiled and replied to his sister that she appeared to know him well. Lu said of course. After all, she trusts him completely. And then Lee decided to reveal that their next step would be the spicy, incredibly flavorful malatin. When he arrived at the market, the vendor asked the guy what he could offer him. Lee recalled that the flavor of malatin lies not in the ingredients themselves, but in the various spices. The usual spices are pretty easy to find, but the most important chicken seasoning is simply not here. Its preparation involves a complex process of chemical treatment, and this is definitely not found in this world. You'll have to make it yourself. Lee started making his dish and after tasting it said it tasted about the same. But suddenly, from the street, someone started apologizing to Lu and saying they were sorry. They still want to work with her. Lu replied to the girls that no. They had already shown their sneaky nature. There's no guarantee they won't do it again. The girls said the candy thing didn't work at all, just let her take pity on them. They promise it won't happen again. Just then Lee came out and told the girls to go inside. He had something to discuss with them. Lee set out plates for them all, and told them it was his new malatin dish made with a special seasoning. The dish itself they can make themselves, but this is the kind of seasoning they will have to buy from him. However, a box of condiments would cost 800 coins, and whatever they could earn from the dishes themselves would stay with them. The girl was surprised and said 800 coins for one box. The girls told Lu that it's not that they don't believe her, it's just that it's a case. And then Lu replied that whether it's a case or not, they will understand after they taste the dish. The girl took the plate and said that these are just ordinary vegetables boiled in water. What's special about them? The second girl said that if you took away that seasoning, the dish would be no different from what everyone normally eats. Just then, Lu took a bite and started screaming at what the food tasted like. The dough absorbed the flavorful soup, becoming soft on the outside and crispy on the inside. And its flavor, it's something unimaginable. She said her tongue was starting to go numb from that refreshing and sweet taste. It felt like it would envelop her whole body if she took one more bite. The girls were surprised and asked if it was really that good. And they decided to try it too. Taking a bite each, they both suddenly opened their eyes. One of them shouted that she had never tasted anything tastier in her life. Lee, seeing their reactions, said that he thought the malatin dish could start selling today. Immediately on the roar, the girls started shouting that there was a new malatin dish for sale. It's delicious, spicy and savory. People started eating it, and saying it was so good. Lu asked her brother, what if the malatin gets stolen just like the sugar caramelized berries? Lee replied that there was nothing special about this dish, except for the seasoning. If someone can replicate the flavor of the seasoning, he will admit defeat himself. People started trying to make malatin themselves and sell it. But one of the buyers said that their malatin was tasteless. And what's the point of selling it a couple coins cheaper if it's not even close to the Lee family's malatin? And it's time to get out of here, and they'd better stand in line at Wangfangji's for a while and eat some proper malatin. Customers told the girls that such a dish should have been sold in all sorts of restaurants, not on the street. This malatin is superb. How do they make it taste so good? The girl replied that it was a family secret. The owner was not allowed to talk about it. The guy told the girl that the owner knows a lot about it. But he was distracting her the whole time while one of the men stole something and hid it in his clothes. The man used all the ingredients for his concoction and calling a friend asked, what does he think it tastes like malatin? The guy tried it and replied that it was somewhere around 70%, but it still wasn't the same. The guy got upset and said that they had poached quite a few of their customers. If they could get their hands on this seasoning, not only would they rebuild their business, but it would probably double their income. The guy replied that was correct, and told him not to worry, he would get him the recipe for this seasoning. The next day, Lee and Lu came to the market with their groceries. People were already standing in line saying that they were finally open. They were just waiting for them. Lee realized that this was great, and the Malatin was already on everyone's radar. The next specialty would be Hogo. But first we'd have to rent some space. But suddenly, a guy came up to them and asked, "Are they the owners of Wang Fuji?" Lee asked, "Do you need something?" The guy replied that he was the owner of the Sei family store, which was not far from here. And he is willing to pay 50 taels of silver for a recipe to season their dish. All he needs is the recipe, and they can go on with their business. Lee asked, 50 taels? And told Mr. Sai not to take him for an idiot. Sai replied that the price could be negotiated. How much would they want? Lee replied immediately that the prescription was not for sale. Sai lost his temper and asked Lee who he thought he was and moved on to insults, and ordered his men to crush everything around him. Sai asked the guy, had he changed his mind yet? How much would he sell the prescription for? Lee told his sister not to be afraid, he would take care of everything. But then some guys came in on Lee's defense, and started beating these guys like sacks. The master asked owner Sai, why does he use such dirty methods? Doesn't he care about his reputation at all? Sai asked Vigaya, is he a complete idiot? When this Lee becomes even more famous, he'll have to close his shabby restaurant too. Lee walked up to Mr. Zhang and thanked him for saving them. Fugai said that there was no need to thank him for such a thing, and he would like to talk business with him too. Don't let Lee think, he's not going to beg him for the seasoning recipe. He just wants his Malatin to start selling in his restaurant. Naturally, he will pay in advance for all the meals that will be sold in his restaurant. How about 8 for 2? 80% of the proceeds from the Malatino will be his. 20 will be left for the restaurant. What would the guy say to that? Lee was surprised, because he didn't think that an ordinary street hot dish would cause such a commotion. But it didn't turn out the way he thought it would. It seemed that he was going to get into more trouble every day. Lee told Zhang that he had made him a very generous offer. He would come to see him tomorrow to discuss the rest of the details. The master replied that he would be waiting then. On a dark night, the competitor ordered his men to find Lee's neighbor, and the boy told the master that his name was Go. Sai asked Go if he knew what was required of him. If he does everything, he'll get 50 taels of silver. And the sooner the better. Go replied that he understood perfectly, and he was honored to work for Mr. Sai. That same day, Go climbed into OM Lee's backyard, and said that that asshole was encroaching on Mr. Sai's business. He's gonna get his damn recipe, and his business will be ruined. Then Lu will be his for sure. But suddenly jumping off the wall he fell into a large spiked trap. He was in so much pain that he even covered his mouth with his hands. Lee heard strange noises and said some underdog decided to break into his house to steal the recipe. And luckily, he had prepared in advance for this outcome, and he hopes he enjoyed it very much. Go didn't resist for long and ran away in fear. Lee saw him, and wondered what he had forgotten here. Could it be that he had been bribed? If he left things as they were, those bastards would definitely do something. We gotta figure out a way to end this. But then Lu came out and asked her brother what was going on. Lee replied that everything was fine, he was just trying to catch some rat. Lu immediately ducked into her brother's arms in fear and asked him if he had already gotten rid of her. Lee thought for a moment, and replied that she had run away. But he felt very embarrassed, and suggested that she should go to bed, it was getting late. Lee was very surprised at this, and he wondered why it was so hot since it was fall, and his heart was beating so hard, as if it were ready to jump out. The girl asked the young mistress that the appearance of the owner of Xiantian's body in the Star Palace had already broken the eye seal of her body, after all. So why doesn't she go home? There she could properly consolidate her results, and strengthen her body. Madame replied that you was stupid, possessors of such a body were extremely rare, so she just had to make him her subordinate. You asked surprised, genuine? Wouldn't it be better as a husband? She wouldn't mind making him her husband, would she? It would be perfect if he was handsome too. In that case, the head of the family would have to cancel her planned engagement. But mistress couldn't bear it, and turned around abruptly. Mistress asked you, is she just messing around? She'll put her in her place right now. Madame thought that the compass of the sacred text had never been able to detect this person. Perhaps it was because he had not yet had time to fully realize the capabilities of his body. Apparently, I'll have to go to the head of Gu and ask him for a list of all the participants of the last festival. Of course, I didn't want to check everyone one by one, but there is no other choice. The next morning in front of owner Zhang's restaurant, Li brought the package and said that he was very grateful for his very generous offer, and he was willing to reciprocate by agreeing to it. However, he had one condition. Zhang says that he is willing to listen to him. However, he wants to warn that 80% to 20% is the maximum he can offer. Li replied that no, it has nothing to do with money. He works with two sisters who also sell malatin on the street. Couldn't he let them pick up the condiments every morning just from his restaurant? Zhang was surprised and asked why it was so complicated. An old man came up to them and said that malatin had become very popular and was continuing to grow in popularity. Naturally, some envious person would have a sneaky thought. If these girls take the seasoning from him, they will automatically get his protection. He believed right, young man? Li turned around and told Elder Gu that nothing would be hidden from his gaze. That's right. That's exactly what he wanted. Gu said that owner Zhang was quite a capable master, so a bunch of petty bandits would never dare to touch these girls. Zhang asked the guy that he wished to use his little restaurant as a defense. Immediately, Li held out another box. He said that as a thank you to owner Zhang, they would deliver one box of condiments to them for free. Zhang laughed and replied that he could see his sincerity now, and he would take care of it. Zhang started shouting that with this seasoning, he would be able to earn 4 to 5 taels a day. His restaurant would finally start to flourish. Gu said that Zhang is his old friend, so he can vouch for him. He will take care of his malatin and wine himself, so he should fully concentrate on preparing for the county exam. Li thanked Elder Gu for the advice, but he can't for now. He urgently needs to earn as much money as possible. Because of him, his little sister Lu Linglong is now in the hands of a brothel, and he needs to get money to get her out of there. Gu said that's it, then he won't insist. If he has any problems, he can come to the county academy and find him. He was sure that with his talent, he would have no problem passing the county exam, so let him try his best. Li listened to the elder and thanked him. Yu at this time came with Madame and said that the elder Gu of Ling County was now at the Zhang family's restaurant. But suddenly, Madame felt a familiar feeling and realized that the owner of Santian's body was somewhere nearby. When she saw Li, she thought it was him. She remembers him. He was the one who suddenly appeared at the poetry festival and finished 5 couplets in the time of 20 breaths. She couldn't get a proper look at him then, and it was definitely him. Li asked her, did they know each other? Why was she suddenly blocking his way? Mistress began to reach for his hand and replied that she was looking for some talented guy. Let the brother say, what is his literary syllable? Li answered her that he was just a small-time wine merchant. Everyone in their county knows that. He's definitely not some great talent she's looking for. Passers-by began to say that it was the Li family wine cellar. The girl must have gotten the wrong name. The lady was surprised and wondered what kind of feeling it was. Li said that they had sorted out the misunderstanding and then he would go home. The lady immediately ordered you to find out about this wine cellar. Madame said at this time that she kept wondering where she had heard this name. It was indeed him, the elder of the 4 great academies and the elder of the Gojiquin Academy, the former head of the Gu military ministry. Mrs. and greeted the elder. Gu replied that he had long since left his position as the head of the war ministry, not even knowing what the Yin family's daughter needed from him, and told Mr. Gu that Lin County has announced the owner of Xintian's body. She would like a list of the participants of the past Lin County Poetry Festival, including those who are not yet enrolled in any academies. Gu immediately answered her loudly that there was no way she would get them. But his energy was so strong that the girls were even surprised. Gu said that he knew that when word got out about him, the big families would immediately go after him. However, he is not going to help any of those families because he doesn't want to become an accomplice to evil, and if misunderstood, then let her go. If not, he would have to explain it to her in a more brutal way. An told Gu that even if he didn't give her this list, she would still find this person. He would definitely be hers. The next morning, People were already saying that the Zhang family's restaurant had started serving Malatin. The Lies were greatly surprised and sat down at their tables shouting to the waiter to bring them 2 more bowls of Malatin, and asked you if she recognized anything. The girl replied that she had learned that the guy's name was Li. It is said that he is the one who invented the local sweet of hawthorn berries and sugar caramel, and this Malatin. There was nothing else like it. All the neighbors said he had always been average in terms of his studies. I knew right away that it wasn't him. You told Madame that since she liked him so much, why don't they drop by to visit him? An asked him what he was carrying? She only asked her to find out about him because he might be the owner of Tel. The next morning, Li approached the owner and told him that he didn't think they should cooperate. John asked why. Yesterday they used up all the seasoning on the Malatin again pretty quickly. He thought it would be possible to add a couple more boxes of seasoning. Just then, Elder Gu interjected into the conversation and said foolishly, he thinks that the owner of the neighboring restaurants will just stand by and watch their business flourish. They will definitely band together to thwart him. John got angry and said that he would smash their heads if they tried to pull something like that. Gu asked him, is he a complete idiot? What if they set him up? Let him better listen to Li. John asked the guy, he would figure out a way for them to deal with this, right? Li replied that he had an idea. John rejoiced and said that it was very good that he had such a smart junior. Li replied that if someone wanted to mess with his business, he could do it in 2 ways. The first, lure of customers. If you do not deal with this issue, sooner or later his restaurant will start to lose its popularity. On the same day, a guy on the street started yelling at people to come to them. They don't even have a queue, and the taste is no worse than there. But suddenly, the second guy said that the owner Zhang said he would place a few more tables outside so that everyone could enjoy the taste of Malatin. The visitors were very happy and said that they would rather choose Malatin then. Finally, there were free seats, because they were tired of standing in line every time. Zhang told the boy that he knew what people needed. Li told him that this was just the beginning. They wouldn't stop at luring customers. Zhang asked, what other terms could they agree to? He doesn't think his restaurant is going anywhere. They have at least 40 hungry mouths. And then Li told him that it's not like that, there's going to be a price war. The next day, several restaurants teamed up and started saying that their restaurants were 50% off all meals today. At this time in the restaurant, Xia was saying that he didn't think that the owners of so many restaurants would team up with each other. They can afford to lower their prices, but his little restaurant can't. What should he do since their place is empty? Li replied that the fact that they united and turned against them could play into their favor. Because of this, his Zhang family restaurant could become the face of Lin County. Li asked Mr. Jia if he was willing to trust him and play big. Mr. Jia replied that if it worked out, it would increase his income, but in the event of a proeval, his restaurant and Li would no longer be able to recover. Li replies that he knows exactly what he's talking about. But he promises that he will do everything he can to save their restaurant. The big restaurants in Lin County are behind this oppression of your restaurant and its food. If they don't break the shackles of these 9 major Lin County restaurants, the 10th restaurant will never appear. They will crush anyone who tries to enter the Dragon's Gate. This time, thanks to Malatin, the challenger is his restaurant. And it's actually quite easy to get out of this situation. The big restaurants have only been able to pit the small ones against them because of their general resentment towards them. If they let them sell Malatin, they will have more reason to hate them, and then the owners of the big restaurants will no longer be able to manipulate the small ones, and this vicious circle will finally end. Then any one of these restaurants will be able to enter the Dragon's Gate. John asked the guy if he was sure it would work. Li replied that he was about 60% sure. The man was surprised and asked how so. The guy asked, isn't that enough? Zhang thought it over and replied that he agreed, and it was time to play big. He had it all to himself. Li told Mr. Zhang that he wouldn't let him down, and decided to give him his idea about this mess. At the restaurant leaders' meeting, the man said that Chang's restaurant was empty almost all day today. He thinks he will be completely bankrupt very soon. Let the others not worry, they will bear all the costs of these actions. All they have to do is wait. But some restaurant heads said that they would not participate tomorrow. Some even said that Mr. Zhang is a very good man. He even shared this wonderful seasoning with him. It would be unfair to do that to him. The second restaurant manager also said he would say no. All the more reason for small restaurants to stick together. The harmony strikes a richness. Mr. Xia was surprised at Zhang sharing the Malatana seasoning. What is he going to lure customers with then? Li decided to take a different course of action and provided the boys with a new next course, called Hogo. Zhang tasted it and said it was moderately spicy and flavorful. It felt like it was intoxicating his head. Gu tried it too and said it was delicious. Just one bite. So flavorful, refreshing and moderately spicy. Zhang said that the spiciness of this dish instantly pierced his entire body. This dish is tastier than even Malatin. Its sharpness and spiciness can't be compared to anything. Li saw such a thing and told Mr. Zhang that he now believed that his restaurant would soon become the face of Lin County. Zhang was greatly pleased and without any hesitation, he replied to him that everything was going as it should. Zhang immediately suggested to Brother Li that they could start selling it today. The guy replied that no, it was better not to rush into it. Li slowly poured wine into his plate and said that in order for Hogo to really become a hit, you need to build a proper marketing plan. 2 days later, passers-by asked what was going on with owner Sheng's restaurant. The guy replied that he had had no customers at all for the past couple of days. One of the passers-by said that everyone already knew that he had decided to close the restaurant. And then Zhang came up to them and asked who decided to close the restaurant, and told the passers-by that for their information, he and Li have decided to team up and preparations are in full swing. So in the meantime, they are creating new dishes and brewing wine of the highest quality. The guys asked him, is the wine of the highest quality? He doesn't think it will taste better than owner SAE's 100 colors. He's not bragging, but even his wine is better than theirs. One of the guys said that's right. They brew one of the best wines in all of Lin County. Zhang replied that if they didn't believe him, he would prove to them that there was no wine in the whole county better than theirs. And then Zhang attached the wine competition and said that if their wine really turned out to be the best, he would personally pay them 100 taels of silver. Fellows saw the reward of 100 taels and said he would brew the best wine of his life for it. Zhang saw that Brother Li's plan really worked. Now he was sure that they would have plenty of customers on the opening day of the restaurant. A couple days later, Sheng's restaurant was hosting an event. The master was thanking everyone for choosing to support them. In honor of the opening today, they were having a 50% discount on all of their dishes. The managers of the other establishments told Zhang that they didn't need it. Everyone came here just for 100 taels of silver for the best wine. Lu watched and told her brother that so many people had come here. Li replied to his sister that it seems like they would be able to get their youngest Linglong back in a couple of days. Zhang immediately removed the tablecloth and said that he would not delay. And in these 5 days they were brought as many as 20 different wines. They have chosen 30 random people who will taste all the wines and vote for their favorite. At the end they will count the votes and reveal the winner. Everything will be fair. And then Sei came in and asked, random? Justly? How do they know that Zhang didn't bribe these people? This is more like trickery than justice. People were starting to panic too and asked, how would they know? Li thought at this moment that he didn't expect things to go as smoothly as they were supposed to. They want a clean fight, they were about to get it. Li realized that all the previous times he had sold diluted wine, but today he would show them the taste of 100 ergatu. Li decided to speak up and said that since they doubted the honesty of their jury, they could ask Elder Gu and the Academy's disciples to evaluate the wine. A master of the way of literature would not lie to them. The kids were excited and said that now they wouldn't have to question the honesty of those who would be grading. Li turned to the students and said that he would like to ask them for a small favor. And at that very second, they revealed their cards. The disciple said that a worthy person would always be honest with himself. The path of the literary Tao will not accept a liar, and in a moment of releasing their energy into the white light they used the powers of honesty and promised. Immediately, they tried ergatu wine and started screaming that it had such a refreshing mild flavor, yet strong taste. The girl also said that her body was unable to resist this wave of pleasure. The disciples immediately all said together that they were choosing ergatu without any doubt. Sei was surprised and thought, this can't be happening. How could his wine lose to this? Immediately licking the mug he said that this wine was not so good. But suddenly an enlightenment of honesty appeared before him. Sei starts smiling widely and says that his wine of 100 colors is definitely worse than ergatu. he admits defeat. The others started asking, is this wine better than the wine of 100 colors? Amazing! Owner Sae recognized it. Sae got really pissed off and said to Lee that one defeat was nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Lee looked at him with his gaze and asked, one defeat wasn't enough for them? Do they want a second one? He immediately ordered his men to serve a new dish. The guys started asking what smelled like that. Why did he start drooling? Lee replied that ergator wine would be perfect for their new hogo dish. The more they ate, the more they would enjoy their wine. The people present immediately started asking for them to give them a taste. People started saying that this hogo is even tastier than Malatin. Now they will only eat at Zheng's place. Lee asked Sae if he would like to eat. Why doesn't he try it too? The servant turned to the boss and said he wanted to try it too. Sae got angry and told him to shut up. He won't put a bite in his mouth. Lee told Onersia that it looks like his plan to harass the Zhang and Lee family's restaurants has completely failed. The next day there were a lot of people gathered in front of the restaurant. The manager came out and said that guest number 133, his order was ready. Guest number 133 replied that they were on their way. It's a good thing he got there early, or they never would have had time to try hago. Lee told his sister that thanks to the sale of wine, Malatin and hogo, they were finally able to collect 300 taels of silver. Now they would be able to rescue their little sister. Lu immediately went over and hugged her brother. She said she was so glad he was with them. And she asked him not to leave them alone. Lee said she was stupid, and of course he wouldn't leave them. But then Zhang came out and asked him what he was doing there. Let him come over and they'll have a drink in honor of the holiday. Lu told her brother that he could go rest, and she would pick up Linlong from the 100 Flavors house in the meantime. Lee replied that then they would already see each other at home. At the celebration, Zhang tells Lee that his restaurant literally rose from the dead because of him, and thanks. Lee replied that no, he should thank them. If it wasn't for them, he wouldn't have been able to raise the amount of money needed to rescue his youngest. Once he is done with that, then he can fully focus on learning the path of literature. And then Zhang stood up and told him that if he planned to study the way of literature, why not study with old man Gu? Let him not look at the fact that he looks like an old man now. He was once a very big shot. Gu told Lee to get down on one knee and offer him wine. Then he would become his teacher and take care of him. Lee thought immediately how come he suddenly had a teacher. Zhang told the guy not to sit down and acted. And then Lee got down on one knee at once and said that he wanted to offer Elder Gu the wine. Gu said that since he was now his student, here was his first assignment to write a poem. Lee was surprised and asked, a poem? Gu replied, that's right, let him take the topic of wine. Lee asked in surprise, wine? And then he wondered and didn't understand why he couldn't remember any poems about wine. Zhang told Lee to ignore him, the old guy was just teasing him since he was drunk. The guy replied to him not to worry, he can handle it. Lee realized that he had a collection of tens of thousands of poems in his head. He started leafing through and wondered why he couldn't catch a single poem about wine, and then it occurred to him that he hadn't just drank not enough wine himself. He needed a little more. And immediately he opened the wine and started drinking, staggeringly hesitated for a moment. But Gu told him he was too drunk. Zhang grabbed his hand and offered to let him carry him home. Suddenly, Lee replied to tell them to wait, for he had already thought of a poem about wine, and used the way of enlightenment. Lee began to wave his brush and asked, can they not see how the waters of the famous Huanghe, from the heavenly heights descending hard to the sea to return no more? Lee began to compose and say that having achieved happiness in life, let him drink it to the bottom. Let the cup be full under the young moon. Gu and Zhang were greatly surprised, for they realized that the talisman of the Xintian body holders was standing in front of them, and was sitting on the other side of the village in a room at this time, and saw that it was the appearance of Xintian's talisman. She immediately used the icing ability, and this time he wouldn't escape it. Gu told Lee that he of course knew that he possessed a talent for the path of literary Tao, however, he had not even imagined that he would turn out to possess a Xintian body. Such a talent is too terrible in the wrong hands. It might even accidentally kill someone. Gu thought that it was likely that the released Xintian talisman had completely broken the ice shackles of that family girl, and she had clearly sensed it. She might already be on her way here. Since she found out about it, that means the other major families are already aware of it. We can't let them find Lee. Otherwise, he'll only die. Gu used his powers and told Li that he would have to seal his chi the way of literature, and ordered Zhang to get Li and his family out of Lin County right now. He hoped that his disciple would only be safe. Li saw at this moment that another monument had appeared. Could it be that if the literary Tao accepts the poem he created, it becomes a special monument? At this time he began to hear Lu yelling at him to wake up. Let him not scare her, she only thought he had recovered after all. He immediately realized that they were the voices of his older sister and younger Luan. He doesn't want them to worry about him, he needs to wake up soon. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lu and Luan standing in front of him. The girl was very happy that her brother was awake. Li told the younger one not to cry, he's fine. Lu hugged them all and told them that her brother was awake. Li asked his sister, what's going on? And where are they going? Lu replied that she didn't know herself. Elder Gu organized the whole thing. He left a letter for him, and said that he would understand everything when he read it. Li read the letter and realized that he was thanking his teacher for everything he had done for him. He gives him his word that he will become stronger. So much so that only he himself will own his own destiny. When Donghua Li arrived in the city, he told his sister that his teacher had written to him in a letter that they were here. But they were stopped by a guard and replied that they were not allowed to enter Bailu Academy. Just then, Li introduced himself and said that he had come to see Deputy Director Su, and immediately placed the talisman in his hands. The guard replied that Deputy Su had warned them of his arrival. However, only he would be able to enter the place. Li asked the girls to sit in a nearby restaurant for now. He would find them as soon as he was done with everything. The guards immediately opened their talismans and began to open the displacement gate, and began to use their powers. Li immediately moved to another place. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and saw several points of the world. But suddenly, from the heavenly palace, 9th floor, Zhushan told the guy to enter the room. Li opened the door and introduced Su to the vice principal. The deputy replied that he would never have thought that a teacher would personally vouch for a mediocre kid and get him into the academy like that. Su said that however, since it was his esteemed teacher's request, he would not ask unnecessary questions. However, he will not be involved in his training, he is on his own here. Su immediately threw the talisman into his hands. Li thoughtfully asked him what he should use to write on this talisman. Su asked in surprise, what? He is unable to even use the chi of the literary Tao. Is he going to have to teach him the very basics? Su decided to test it in practice and attacked the boy. Li was frightened, but he simply covered his face with his hands and deflected the attack. Su wondered and thought, how was a boy who couldn't even use the chi of the literary Tao able to repel the attack of his chi? This can only mean one thing, that he has great talent. Li asked the deputy if he was okay. Su replied that he was fine. He was just trying to stir up the chi in his body with his palm chi, but it had more chi of the literary Tao than he expected. He just needed to concentrate it on his fingertips, and then they would be able to write their name on the talisman. Li immediately thought of the words to sense chi and concentrate it. And immediately he thought of a new name, and wrote on the talisman Li Tai. Li immediately afterwards thanked the deputy for his help. Su thought at this time, who had he sent to them in the first place? Li started walking around the academy, and saw that there were quite a few students in the 3rd district. Apparently, he was considered a poor student. But suddenly one of the guys hugged him and asked him, is he new? His name is Anan, what's his name? And Li introduced himself to him too. Anan asked Li, what is he so worried about? Is he really that scary? Li replied that it was nothing like that. Suddenly, a scroll opened in front of them and the Holy January Literary Tao, 9th floor of Zhushan Tower was announced. Li was surprised after this, and felt a lot of pressure. Is this really the first step to entering the world of the path of literary Tao? When the students heard such an announcement, they began to say that they would write their poem and next time they would be charmingly included in the list of saints of the literary Tao. The ocean of knowledge has no shores, long live knowledge. Li heard such talk and realized that if he got on this list and accumulated enough chi of literary Tao, he would raise his stage and become stronger. Anan told Li that he might not even dream of such a thing. The academy only shares its resources with genius students. This did not apply to them. But suddenly, someone from behind told Anan not to talk nonsense. If the poem is really good, the academy doesn't look at whether it's genius or not. it will share resources with it and help promote it. But Anin does have a point. It was unlikely that the academy would look for worthwhile works in their third district. He told Brotherly, if he wanted to fill in, have him add the name of their academy to the application. Then he would get at least minimal help. Lee obeyed and thanked the elder. Anin told Lee not to get so upset. It's not like this is the only way to raise his stage after all. The kid said that's right, there are other ways. Lots of them, as he doesn't imagine. Lee understood that in the past 100 years, several dozen masters had managed to conquer the peak of the Saint Literary Tao list. That was why this cultivation method was called the most difficult. However, this rule does not apply to him. He holds the works of all the greatest geniuses of his world born in the last 5,000 years. The Saints List way is his shortcut. And then someone said recess is over. Let them continue their training. Lee told the others that in that case he would go. Anin told his friend that even the ultimate slacker knows to at least pretend to study. Why did he just bail? The guy replied that he didn't know. Maybe he just decided he didn't have a chance and gave up on everything? After a month, Lee showed up later than everyone else and said he welcomed everyone. He was the first to leave after class. Anin said that he had never met such a frivolous student before. It felt as if he didn't care at all about getting on the list of the holy literary path. Compared to him, even he is a diligent student. It was the new year. Suddenly Lee met his sisters in front of the house, and Lin Luan congratulated everyone. Lin Long hugged her brother and said that she wanted to give the baby to Brotherly. Lu was surprised and asked her what she was saying. Lin Long asked, "Why is that? And by the way, the sister can also marry Lee's brother." Lee told his sister not to be angry, because Lin Luan is still a baby. He hopes that they will spend the coming year together as members of a big family. And at night Lee lay down with the girls and wondered how he could sleep under such conditions. Was this such a test of his patience? But suddenly, he stood up and decided that he still wouldn't sleep. Tonight after midnight, the list of the Holy Literary Tao was supposed to open. He thought it was time to add his poems to it. He began to try and execute the steps, saying that he first needed to infuse his chi into the talisman, and then open the Holy Literary Tao list. Once in his world he saw that the list had only opened a couple minutes ago, and there were already so many verses. He thinks it's really going to be a fierce battle. The poem offering up the wine was too effective, he doesn't think it's worth putting out there. Raising a stork on a tower, on the other hand, is fine. Just need to change the title first. He immediately began his composition of a new verse, and waving his hand sent it off in charge. Lee thought, how could a masterpiece of classical poetry from the Tang dynasty, which had been passed down from generation to generation for 1,000 years, not be included in the list of the Holy Literary Tao? And the next day, on the first day of the new year, Lee opened the list and saw that the verse wasn't there yet. How did a poem by a brilliant poet of the Tang dynasty not even make the top 100? Or maybe it's a joke? The next day, the guy was telling Brotherly that he shouldn't worry so much about the saints list. More than 20,000 talented writers send their works there every year. Anin told him that only the truest genius, or the luckiest person, could get to the top of the list. Lee asked, how do people get on this list? Anin replied that through fame, and showed his hand. He saw several people saying that they hoped the Wenchang'an monument would help them get on the list of the Holy Literary Tao, and many writers spend huge sums of money to go to the poetry festivals of different counties. After all, then they have a chance to go to the Wenchang monument and gain some fame. The Holy Literary Tao Spsiak of the Holy Literary Tao is a list of masters selected by humans, not the literary Tao itself. Various academies and county masters participate in the voting, so this list usually includes the most famous and popular works. Only someone who can initially win the attention of most of the masters and mentors of this world will be able to rank high on this list. And unfortunately, because of this, most of the poems just get lost in this sea of submissions before anyone even notices them. Lee said he understood. And so an unknown poet has virtually no chance of making the top list? Anin replied that this was not entirely true. There were many examples of unknown but very talented poets who managed to soar to the heavens without anyone's help. You can't fool a saints list. The guy said they have no support or fame, they shouldn't even dream of it. Wouldn't it be better if they had a drink? But suddenly the talisman in Lee's pocket lit up by itself. The boys were surprised and asked, what's going on in Brother Lee's pocket? Anin saw the verse and said that at first glance this poem may seem uncomplicated, but it instantly got him through to the core. Guy also said that the white sun hides in haste behind the mountain. This line is so neat, but at the same time it has a real sense of the majesty of the sun and the mountain. And the second line is as good as the first. It so easily conveys the energy and simultaneous calmness of the water flow. These lines just perfectly complement each other. This could only be written by a true master of the syllable. Brother Taibai's tower climbing is sure to excite the world soon. They must show it to the world. Li said he thought they were exaggerating too much. We can consider the first step taken. It's up to him now. The elder said that the struggle for places on the saints' list had officially begun. The man came to the head and said that it was his son's poem that he had sent to the literary Tao saints list. The head realized what the guy wanted from him, and replied that he would do his best. Suddenly, the guy shouted to the master that Wencheng's monument had cracked. The master ordered them to bring a new one, and quickly. Apparently, strong changes have begun to take place. Do your best to make the poem from the Academy solidify its place in the top 50 list. Li realized that a full 5 days had passed, and the tower climbing could only get up to the 99th place. He thought, is this really the ceiling an unknown poet can reach without fame and support? And suddenly out of the blue, one of the guys came out to an urgent announcement, and said that this poem is the truest masterpiece of poetry, and he's going to give this poem all his literary chi. The teachers asked him, is he out of his mind? If he does this, he's putting his future as a master of the literary Tao on the line, and if this poem makes the list, but if not, he will lose all his accumulated literary chi and severely damage his palace of literature. The guy replied to his brothers not to worry about him, it's a masterpiece worth betting everything on. He's sure they'll cook up the exact same solution once they read it themselves. The guy said he was a disciple of Guan Hanren, puts all his literary chi on the poem Climbing the Tower. He started reading his poem and the students cheered and said that this poem really made their hearts flutter. Suddenly, Li took hold of the medallion and thought, what's going on? It had been at 99 for a whole week, and then it went up to 5 overnight. The disciples looked at the list and asked, what is this? Some genius had shown up on the 10th floor of Jushan Tower? And how was he able to climb so high without support from the academy? A month ago, this guy couldn't even use literary chi. How could he rank 5th on the list of the Holy Literary Tao? It turns out he was mistaken in his judgment. He's not a mediocre kid. Master sent them a real genius. The master at the meeting was saying that the masters of Western Sichuan County had started to vote in favor of climbing the tower. It's the same in northern Liangtan County. And in Baixishan County too. The master asked, when did this Tai Bai come to Bailu Academy? Find out about him quickly. And don't let him get any higher up the list. The master said that Li had only just stepped onto the path of a master of the literary Tao, and had already become one of the most famous poets of their world. He might be able to become a new pillar of literature before Su himself. The second master said that since he was so talented, they should lure him to them. The master replied to him not to be so reckless. For now, they would just observe. Inside the first floor of the central tower, Li came in, but everyone was suddenly silent and didn't say anything. But looking at the people he saw in their faces only envy and anger towards him. After all, they were already the elders of the academy. Li realized that his rapid ascent up the saints' list had created envy in others toward him. He fears that his quiet and peaceful days are at an end. One of the top 3 students from the first district approached Brother Li and asked him if he could tell them what kind of books he usually reads. It's just that they would also really like to be on the list of the Holy Literary Tao. Li replied that lately he had been reading sayings of Confucius, an introduction to the riffraff, and a collection of poems. The guy grabbed Li's shoulder and asked, what dare he mock him? Does he think he can get rid of him by naming a couple of books for beginners? And he's not going anywhere until his question is answered. Li immediately looked at him angrily, and told him to get his hands off. The guy couldn't help himself and magically flew off. Li turned around and didn't even notice that his body now had so much chi path literature. All thanks to the recognition of climbing the tower. The system already mentioned it, so now he's able to affect the world with just his word. But looking around he saw only silence. Li thought that this was the first time he had used the power of this world and he didn't understand a lot of things, so it was better not to make new enemies. Li told the guy he wasn't fooling him. Let him see it for himself if he didn't believe it. That's the book he's reading now. But suddenly, someone from the academy shouted to Lee, and told him to go up to the 7th floor. Lee put the book down, and told the guy he had to go. The guy opened the book and said he actually read Confucius' sayings. But why does he read books with which people are just beginning their literary Tao journey? Maybe they didn't see some secret meaning in them? We need to reread. Lee immediately went up to the 7th floor and entered to greet the master and deputy master. Tower Master Qin Xiuman said that there was no need to speak in such a guilty tone. He didn't call him to scold him. The academy offers him a transfer to its main tower. Let him speak at once. There he will be provided with fame, cheap pills and all the necessary resources. In addition, it was promised that the founder would personally impart his qi of the literary Tao to him. This would allow him to reach the 5th stage of the literary Tao path in no time. Such a chance only comes once in a lifetime. Li thought immediately, stage 5? This doesn't even look like training. It's more like the artificial creation of a powerful master. The system once mentioned that 5th stage masters are not afraid of fire or water. They can fly up to the heavens and single-handedly deal with an army of 10,000 warriors. Li asked if they would let him ask what he would have to pay for such a generous favor. The master let out his energy, and replied that it was very simple. He would have to pay with his diligence. Their academy is going to spend monstrous resources on him. And if he fails them, her wrath and ashes will be gone from him. Li realized that if he refused, he would become an ordinary pawn in the hands of the academy. Then he would no longer have power over his own destiny. Li asked the master if he had any other option. The master answered him, if he refused, no one would insist. He thinks he's just an ordinary student on the 9th floor of Junash Tower. Naturally, all the promised privileges are revoked, and he will have to take all the upcoming exams himself. Li realized that he didn't want to lose his freedom. Besides, the power could be achieved by himself. And then he told the master that he would choose the second way. The master said so be it. However, he still couldn't leave him unrewarded for his services, so he asked the academy to give him something from the treasury of their tower. Li replied that there was no need and anything the master chose for him would be fine. The master said that was out of the question. He will take him to the treasury of their tower now. Let him choose wisely. The tower masters have been accumulating all these treasures for thousands of years. The master patted the boy's back with his hand and said that he could only choose one treasure, and he had exactly 1 hour to think about it. Li wondered why the door to the treasure room looked so shabby. Even the door to his room would be better. They're not trying to screw him over, are they? And then he walked through the door and realized that this was the entrance to a secret realm. In each of these balls of light are all sorts of treasures. And he could choose any one of them. Li realized that he needed to release his qi and let it feel the inner qi of all these treasures. This was the only way he couldn't choose the most suitable one for himself, and it seems to exude an incredibly strong aura from these spheres. Which one should he choose? Suddenly, Li realized what he had found. And without a doubt, this realm was the one that reacted the strongest to his qi, fire attribute technique. He was sure that if the stock of his internal qi became a little larger, the effectiveness of this technique would increase many times over. The master said that since he had already chosen the treasure, it was time for him to come out. Li was immediately thrown from the room. The master told the kid that he now realized that their Bailu Academy encourages everyone who deserves it. Li replied that he understood, and thank goodness for that. But he realized it was even better if he had gotten him out of there a little more gently. The master said that he should now go to his room and continue to study diligently. Let all the academies do the rest. Their academy would make sure that his poem Climbing the Tower would retain its place on the list of the Holy Literary Tao. In front of the house door, Lu jumped out and told her brother to see who had come to see them. Li walked into the courtyard and saw Uncle Zhang. The master told him that they hadn't seen him for a long time, so he came to check on him. Zhang asked the boy how he was doing here. He and his master had already missed him. Li replied that he was fine. Zhang said then the recipe for the new dish he sent him had created quite a sensation. He came to give him his share. Here's 60% of everything they made from it. Let him have it. Li replied that no. Right now, the entire operation of their restaurant rests on him, so he can't take away his honestly earned money. Zhang told him not to talk nonsense. After all, He was the one who founded Wang Fuji, and do everything to make this restaurant famous. He, on the other hand, could be considered as the ordinary working hands who organized all this. If he didn't have to help his brothers who were kicked out of the army, he wouldn't even take 10%. Li asked his uncle, "Does he help former soldiers?" Zhang replied that he did. But he considers them his brothers. They had all once fought on the side of the Jin dynasty. Back then, they were on the verge of death almost every day, and now the few who did manage to keep themselves alive have to scavenge on the streets to feed themselves. He just can't watch his comrades in arms slowly die because their country has simply forgotten about them. So he helps them out with silver from time to time. Li told his uncle that he knew how unfair the world could be, but lately he had only been thinking about improving along the path of the literary Tao, so he had begun to forget about it. But he reminded him that he wanted to help people. If the country doesn't help them, he will. Let his uncle bring his brothers to him, and he will show him the way to a decent life. The next day, Shang brought people over and said that this was the same person he had told them about. He promised him that he would help them find a way to feed themselves and their family. The men started asking how this little brat could help them. They're fed up with all the empty talk. Zhang got angry and told them to bite their tongues, and appealed to Yang Changshi that without the 5 taels of silver he had given him, his mother would have died long ago. And that goes for Sunu too, who gave him 10 taels to buy medicine for his sick child. He was only able to share that money with them because Brotherly taught him how to earn it, and now he's decided to interrupt his training to help them. Worthless trash. Only he treats them like human beings. Li decided to join the conversation and told Uncle Zhang not to get angry. It's normal. When people don't trust a stranger, Zhang told the guys that they would all only address him as Mr. Li. Did they all understand? And do they all want to live a decent life, right? Then let them immediately shout it louder. Li thanked them for their trust and said his idea was to teach people how to catch fish, not feed them fish. This is the recipe for all the food, wine and sweets he created. They have found considerable success in Lin County. They will establish themselves in this county as well. Let them start small and don't worry about anything. He will keep an eye on them and help with advice. They can feel free to go to him if they have any problems. People were surprised and asked what they were willing to share these valuable recipes with them. Zhang tells Li that they can't just accept them. His brothers are ready to repay his kindness with their faith and service. From now on, he will be their master. Li was surprised and realized that he had somehow randomly acquired his own little army. And then the master announced that the first place on the list was the verse climbing the Li Tai Bai Tower. And now it was time for the award ceremony. Suddenly, an energy that he himself hadn't even expected flowed into Li's chest. Master told Li that people's faith, hopes and admiration had taken the form of Qi literary Tao, and it would now pass into his hands. Li bowed and replied that he was grateful and would definitely fulfill their expectations. Master told the fellow to take the same of their qi and ascend to the 9th stage of the path of literary Tao. Li began to look around and said that absorbing so much qi not only strengthened his body, but also contributed to the appearance of more Wenchangin monuments inside his literary Tao palace. And it turns out that he can grow stronger through his poems. Upon arriving at the theater scaffolding, they were greeted by a guy and told to take a seat at a vacant table. Li asked his uncle how they were doing. Zhang replied that 2 had already finished their little training and gone to work, but the rest would need a little more time. But suddenly they heard shouting, and it was Senior Shay. He asked the girl to come with them. He can't make much money playing this pipa. Yan Qinshu was performing in front of people and playing the pipa. She said that they were from the Luanhu gang, one of the 5 biggest gangs in the county. They would already manage to take care of her. Yan told them to get off her back, she wasn't going with them. The others shouted at her that she had no choice. Li saw this and realized that now was not a good time for him to be in conflict with any gangs. But Li immediately banged his hand on the plate with his own hand, and it went straight into boyfriend Chi's hand. The guy got really angry and asked who did that. Li immediately stood up and replied that it was him. He realized that he could no longer consider himself a man and a master of the Tao path if he ignored such a disgusting scene. She got angry and told the guy who he thought he was, "You arrogant bastard. You want to run into the Lunghu gang? Let the brothers teach him a lesson." Li saw them flying at him and turned to his uncle. John laughed and told him that he didn't have to tell him. He would deal with them in no time. Zhang easily repelled all of their attacks, and smeared them one by one. After that, he started laughing and said that they were a bunch of pathetic morons. Is this the intimidating Lunghu gang? Yen turned to Li and said that they should rather leave this town soon. Guy asked, is she afraid that they will try to take revenge? Zhang told the girl that he had nothing to worry about, he could handle them with one hand, ordinary weaklings. Yen replied that it's not that simple. These people, they weren't just brutal killers. They had managed to conspire with the power of their city. Many innocent people had died at their hands. Master saved her life, and she doesn't want anything to happen to them. Li replied that he would manage somehow, no need to worry. Li blushed and told Mistress, is she standing too close? Yen immediately pulled back and apologized for her undignified behavior. Zhang was telling Brother Li along the way that this girl seemed to like him. Why didn't he arrange to meet her in person? Li replied to get his uncle to stop teasing him. It might be better to think about what this Lunghu gang might pull. And yes, could he ask for a few people to be allocated to him? He couldn't be at ease if he didn't know that his sisters were being guarded by someone. Zhang replied that of course he would take care of it. In the evening, Lu and sister walked in the rain. The older one shouted to Linlong to go home soon, but suddenly there were enemies hiding around the corner at this time, and at the opportune moment, they immediately surrounded the girls. Lu asked who they were. The guys said they were that bastard sisters, right? If we can't get Yen, we can have fun with these. At this time, Li heard the news and asked that the Lunghu gang kidnapped his sisters. How could that be possible? Li jumped up abruptly and asked Zhang, where are they now? He will go there now. His uncle stopped him and told him to stop. They are all right. Zhang said that his brothers reacted quickly and didn't let those scumbags get far. By this time, Lu and his sister had also arrived. Linlun began to cry and tell what the brigands had tried to do to them, and immediately cried. Li said that everything was fine, there was nothing to be afraid of. It was already all behind him, and thanked Uncle Zhang for such a rescue. Li said he wouldn't let them get away with it. Lu replied that if it's just for their sake, then don't. It's best not to mess with those thugs. Li said that he and his sister are his closest people. He can't let what happened today happen again. Lu replied that she and her younger sister would just leave the county so they wouldn't annoy him anymore. But suddenly a guy came in unexpectedly, and told Zhang and Li that they were in trouble. Zhang asked, what's wrong? The guy replied that those Lunghu scumbags had sent people to trash their lyric. The bandits were telling them that their head had insulted the Lunghu gang. They won't do business here anymore, or else they'll cut everyone up. Zhang got very angry and promised that he would finish off all those bastards. Li replied that they kidnapped his family first, and then hurt his brothers. If they can't hide from trouble, then deal with it once and for all. Li showed his strength, and shouted that it was time to pull out all the weeds from the roots. Li gathered everyone and said that it all started because of him. He didn't think that there were such strong evil winds raging in Donghua County. But he was the one who would drag them into all this. He bowed down and asked forgiveness from all the brothers. The boys asked him what he was talking about. The scoundrels had only themselves to blame, and Brother Li has done them the greatest favor, and they dare not think he has gotten them into anything. Zhang told the guy to get up. None of them blamed him for this. Li turned to his brothers and said that if they helped him, they would easily deal with this gang. However, he was told that they were soon with the local government. If they attacked them directly, there would be no trouble. But he's come up with a way around the clash with the government. And now he's asking for help with it. Li told the boys that they would need to suspend the Lark's activities for a couple days. He had an assignment for each of them. He told Brother Sun that he would have him investigate all the big shots of the Lunghu gang. Have them send as many men as they can, it's very important. Li asked Uncle Ding, who is an archer, right? He will give him a blueprint that he can use to create a new kind of bow and arrow. It's a folding crossbow. And Brother Tian, the task will be the most difficult and important. He and his brothers will have to infiltrate the gang and sow discord among their members. Li said that he would never mess with his brothers' lives. Everything is already prepared, all that's left is to deliver the killing blow. Just let them trust him. Zhang was surprised, for before he had only considered Li to be an excellent writer and thinker. However, he now realized that he was a born ruler. The next day on the 9th floor of the Academy Tower, Bai Luli walked in and said hello. Guy asked, Had their great poet been doing something bad last night? Didn't get enough sleep? Li replied to brother and to stop him from talking nonsense. And let him not call him that anymore. An said that if he starts begging for it. But suddenly leaves suddenly flew and someone shouted that he had been rejected again. This is a disgrace for the ages. Li was surprised and asked what was going on. And replied that they had received an assignment from the Kunlun Bureau to write a poem for the first installment of a very popular book series. No wonder the Tower Master is angry. If another rejection comes, the assignment will be passed to another academy. And that, he realized, would be a huge blow to their reputation, and asked Li if he wanted to try out his powers. Li replied that he had enough of being bullied. But then the master spoke up and said for all to hear. Each student on the 9th floor of the tower must write a poem for the first installment of the word-eating book series. The one whose poem is accepted will get 500 taels as a reward. And if the sales of the book jump up, he will get 10% of the proceeds later. Li thought, what are they carrying? The words 500 taels and everything were simply incompatible. With that kind of money, he could thank his brothers properly. Li immediately shouted that he would take the case. The guys asked him if he was too confident. Don't let him get too excited, and in a moment, Li looked at his memories and saw that there was nothing like that. But how could there be? He said it was a complete failure. How could you write such a bad love story? One of the guys said he didn't understand who could even like a book like this. And what should he write? He had never been in love himself, so how could he write a poem about love? The guy told his friend not to exaggerate like that. Let him just write a couple lines and that's it. It's not like they were asked to give out something masterpiece. The master told the boys that they had not fully realized the importance of this assignment. As they had said, word-eating had gained a lot of popularity in just 6 months, and their tower was the first to receive this assignment. And the person whose verse appears on this book will gain not only the support of the tower, but also fame among its readers. Li was shocked to hear such words. After such words, a fight started between the students, and everyone tried to write something, because they wished to become famous. Li smiled at this moment, and said that things were even more complicated now. However, when it comes to love poems, this work can't be surpassed by anyone. And suddenly Li went up to the 7th floor and said that he welcomed the esteemed masters, and he came to show them a poem for a book of eating words. The substitute master told Li that he forgot to warn him about something. The master also said that he was the only one of their tower students who didn't need to write a poem. Li was surprised and asked why. Did he do something wrong? Sam replied that he wasn't. His previous poem Climbing the Tower was a masterpiece. But he is still young and might not be able to start holding such a bar right away. If his next creation turns out to be bad, some detractors might take advantage of that and make him look mediocre. He should wait a couple months. Li replied that he understood everything. And then he thanked the esteemed masters for taking care of him. However, he will still give it a try. Li realized that if he had been told this a couple of days ago, he would have backed off. However, now, because of him, the brothers had stopped their stalls and were busy with the Lunghu gang. The master told the boy that he understood his youthful fervor. One wants to always and everywhere be the first, is he right? Li replied that not really, rather he was just confident in his poem. The master said he understood and let the guy let him look at his art. The master, seeing the title of the verse, A New Song of Poplar and Willow Branches, were just surprised greatly. The master's deputy cried out that the faded dark red silks and bitter nuts of the first lines epitomized the hatred of the abandoned woman. The master replied that the last lines are different. Express fully the love of this woman, and the longing for her beloved who has left home for a long time. Sam said that the first lines are pretty straightforward and the last lines are subtle and sophisticated. However, together they described the feeling of love that their women feel. Master thought and said, poignant and heartbreaking poem. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Li looked at them and didn't understand what was going on. He decided to ask the masters. They immediately came to their senses. The master replied to the guy that nothing. It's a wonderful poem. He will give it to the Kunlun Bureau right away. Li said he thanked the masters for such an honor, and immediately decided to bow out. The master said that although his new creation was not as good as the tower climbing, it was undoubtedly a masterpiece. Li had completely crushed all of his opponents. I wonder what he will be able to show them in the future? The substitute master replied that this poem would be perfect for eating words, but is he too skillful for his age? It could be dangerous for him. Master laughed and told old Su that this guy wasn't afraid for himself, so why should they worry about it? But Su is right, Li is the genius of geniuses. They can't hide him for long. We need to keep a close eye on him, and keep him away from anyone. At this time, there were a lot of people gathered in the Kunwen Bureau. The boy asked the others how many times Master Hong had already reread this poem, A New Song of Poplar and Willow Branches. So does he like it, or what? But who is this author of the poem? The guy replied that it seems to be the same Li, a rising star who made it to the top of the latest saints list. But suddenly one, the author of the word-eating book, said that his word-eating book is just not worthy of this poem. He must rewrite it. The guy said, Master Huang, the printing will start in 5 days and they won't make it in time, they shouldn't do it. Juan replied that no, he would have to write a book that would be worthy of this poem. He would have to forget about sleep and write like he had never written before, so don't even let him think of distracting him. One of the guys shouted it was a curse. Why this Li's poetry is so good, he doesn't understand. People came to Kung Wen Huan's bureau, he thanked and said no need. The poem they brought could not be better than the poem A New Song of Poplar and Willow Branches. Tower Master Zhao of Zongyue Academy turned to Master Huang and said, how could he be sure of this if he hadn't even read them? Tower Master Lu also asked, which of the Bailu Academy's masters was able to impress him so much? Huang replied that it was Li Tai Bai. The masters were greatly surprised and immediately realized that it was that guy again. First he took the top spot on the saints list, and now he's also going to make it to the pages of the word-eating book. If that damn genius increases his fame, their academies don't stand a chance. They need to band together and put the brakes on this upstart. At this time, Li was rejoicing and said that he didn't expect them to send the reward so quickly. The boy asked Li's brother, does he not notice anything around him at all? The guy took his head and turned it around, saying that he had taken out 2 times in a row. He is afraid that now the hatred of all the students of the academy is concentrated on him. Li asked Annan's brother what about his, does he hate him too? Annan thought for a moment, and replied that he didn't care how good his poems were, they were friends. And maybe he could buy him a drink, since he made so much money? Li replied that he would, but don't let him cling to him so tightly. Li asked the guy why don't they go to that restaurant he kept talking about. When they arrived at the brothel, a girl met them and greeted Annan, and told him that Sai was already waiting for him. But suddenly Li recognized someone and told the guys to go up without him for now, he needed to go to the bathroom. He immediately met up with the guy. He went outside and told Brother Li that he didn't expect to meet him in such a place. Li replied that apparently students and gangs have one thing in common, they all like to drink and relax. How's their investigation going? The guy replied that there are approximately 500 members of the Lunhu gang. 37 of them are big leaders and smaller leaders. He also found out that the gang boss often meets with the county prison director Zhang. Li said that then the second stage could begin. Let the brothers, under the guise of Lunhu gang people, start provoking the members of the Zitzen gang. The more scenes they make, the better. It will bring them closer to war. The guy asked Brother Li, what do you mean he wants to do all the dirty deeds with other people's hands? Li replied that however it would not help to completely get rid of the Lunhu gang, so he asked Uncle Tian to find all the big ringleaders of the gang. And also it would be just great if among the brothers found people with a similar complexion, and most importantly, they need. But suddenly, Annan suddenly came out and asked Brother Li, was he still not finished? Did he have a stomachache? Li replied that it was time for him to go. If he calculated everything correctly, they would have them in the ring in half a month. Li asked his brother, what was he yelling about? He just went to the bathroom. Annan replied that he just thought he had fallen into the cesspool and wanted to run to his aid. Upon starting the game, Annan laughed and told Brother Li that he had lost again, so let him drink. Li got really pissed off and said there was no way he was going to accept his defeat to the two of them. We have to keep going. But suddenly he fell to the floor. Annan was surprised and said that he had passed out. Apparently the brother is completely unable to drink. Li was already falling asleep and replied that you can't say a man can't drink, and immediately fell asleep on his brother's legs. The next morning, Li woke up and stood up and grabbed his head. He felt like his head was cracking. and his body felt so heavy, a damn hangover. But suddenly the girl lying next to him told him not to beat around the bush. Li thought at once, did he manage to sleep with someone while he was drunk? Looking to the side, he was greatly surprised, for he saw Brother Anan. He didn't believe it, because he couldn't have done it. But Anan came to his senses and started smashing everything around when he saw that Li's brother was sleeping with him together in the same bed. Li asked his brother to calm down. They weren't sleeping. He just fell asleep on it, that's all. His back still hurts. There's nothing wrong with it. Does he realize that? He doesn't blame him for it, so it's best to just forget about it. Anan got angry and asked Li, does he want to leave after this? How dare he? Immediately, he used the electric rope and grabbed his brother. Li asked his brother why he thought it was his fault. So they slept together, so what's the big deal? Anan didn't like that and yelled at his brother a lot. Li was surprised and told him to just say what he wanted, and that was it. Just let him stop it. Anan told Li that he needed to think about it. He would owe him. Li replied that they had an agreement. Li walked out the door and saw that An's brother was prettier than many girls, but he was still a man. It's not like anything terrible has happened. And why exactly should he feel guilty? He'll just go home now and calm down. At this time, the girl in the room approached An and addressed him. An answered her that he had asked her to call him simply Mr. and immediately flipped the girl underneath him and said, this guy. Maybe he should have killed him. The girl replied that it was Li Tai Bai. And replied that Li has become well known at such a young age. He knows almost everything about him. He, on the other hand, has no idea who he is. Lin Luan turned to her brother and said that he had told them he was going with his friends. Then why does he smell like a woman's blush? Lu told the younger one to stop. Let Li rest after yesterday. Let him pass since she made him soup. Li immediately felt that only Lu cared for him so sincerely. He is truly at ease around her. And only next to her does he feel that he is at home. Li walked over to Lu and grabbed her hand and told her that he would make sure that they didn't have to worry about anything else. The guys at this time were beating up their enemies, and saying that it was for them for daring to attack their brothers. The guy from Lungho asked the guys, are they completely crazy here? Do they realize what's going to happen to them? They're from the Lungho gang. The guy came at him with a bat, and hit him and told him that even one step away from death he was still the same piece of shit. The head of the Lungho gang saw his boys killed. The boys told the head that if they just turned a blind eye to it, they would be wiped off their feet. The head told his warriors to tell them that in 3 days they would come to fight to the death. Li said that this was the time to end it all. It seemed like a game before, but now people were beginning to suffer and even die because of his plans. But is he doing the right thing? Zhang told his brother that he didn't do anything wrong. If it wasn't for him, those bastards would have continued to ruin people's lives, and there's no room for long deliberation. Let him give his order. They expect Mr. Li to give the order. Li thanked his men and replied that he understood them. He knows that they have been through countless battles in the north, and understands that for them, fighting with some thugs is not a worthy endeavor. However, they need to eliminate this contagion. If they want to return alive and unharmed, they must act strictly according to his orders. 3 days later they met in an alley, and after gathering a crowd of people they decided to have a wall-to-wall fight. It was a war with the Lungho gang. And Li prepared for this fight very well, and decided to fight. And so the war began. Li said that there are now more than 100 people involved in this battle. The local authorities won't just sit idly by. However, they won't have time, it will be over soon enough. In such a case, the main thing is to act quickly. Step 1. Let them start firing before they realize anything. Immediately, the rooftop warriors used their arrows, and began shooting at the enemies of the Linghu clan. Li told them only to remember that killing them was not the end goal, but only a means to it. The guys who played their roles in the Linghu clan pulled out their masks at the moment of battle. The guys shouted that they must destroy the Linghu gang and take its place. No one should notice that they had substituted that gang's men for their own. Let them remember to disfigure the faces of the corpses so that they would not be exposed. Zhang asked, what then? Does his brother also want to become like them? Li replied that of course not. Uncle himself realizes that eliminating the Lungho gang alone won't change anything. This is just one gang among many. Cruel and greedy people will still rise above the rest and ruin the lives of ordinary people. Instead of relying on others to help them, they should become masters of their own destinies. That's why he decided to use the shell of the Lunghe gang. Only in this way they can change the established orders and give ordinary people a normal life. Zhang was surprised and asked if they were the masters of their own destinies. And was it his brother's intention from the beginning? Li replied to Uncle Zhang to believe him. The day when it will come true is not far off. The warriors told Brother Li that he was amazingly smart. His plan had worked perfectly. Except for old Tian and his men, whom they had roughed up a bit so as not to arouse suspicion, none of them were hurt. They killed 47 thugs from the Lunghe gang with their own hands. That was a hell of a satisfying thing to do. Li replied that they had all done a good job. The warriors said they also decided to give him a small gift. They found the 3 men who had dared to steal his sister. Li told his men to hand him the crossbow. He immediately aimed an arrow at the gang guy's head. Li asked him if he remembered him. The guy asked him, does he have to remember every person he meets? Does he even realize who he's messing with? He's from Lunghe's gang. Have him let him go now. Li got angry and asked, every person he met? He kidnapped his sisters, his family. And he says he doesn't even remember them? But Li took the trigger and a shiver went down his arm. The warrior told his brother that if he couldn't do it, he could do it himself. But Zhang put his hand on the warrior's shoulder and said no need to. The warrior turned around and asked why. Zhang asked him, would he follow a man who was incapable of killing his enemies? And a brother must do this with his own hands. He must show his brothers that he is worthy of their devotion. The warrior said that Brother Li is a very smart and calculating guy, but he is still too young for such a thing. Li said he's no saint, but he never thought he would have to kill. However, he's a completely different case. He shouldn't have touched his family, and so he would have to die after all. And immediately fired his crossbow at the enemy's head. Li said that all the lives of the Lunghe gang members were not worth a hair on his sister's head, and immediately finished off the others. Zhang was at this moment surprised that all these hardships had not broken him. On the contrary, they had turned him into a true ruler of darkness. But the voices of the dead did not leave him, and asked him why he had killed them. He had taken the path of a murderer. You cannot fight violence with other violence, and since he has become a murderer, let him be prepared for the fact that tomorrow they will come for his head. Li asked them, had he gone the way of the murderer? Has he strayed from the path of the righteous? He is Li, and that is his way. The dead were chasing him and calling him a murderer. Li showed his bright light and asked, did they want to die again? But one of the warriors showed in his subconscious as he grabbed Lu and said that no matter how strong he became, there was no way he could protect his family. If he was distracted for even a moment, they would be in his hands again. Li waved his hand and said he was a dead man. The enemy said they had a tragic future ahead of them, and it was all because of him. Li jumped to save his sister, and immediately woke up. Lu heard the screams and came in and asked her brother if he was having a nightmare. Li turned around when he saw his sister, and was happy. Li immediately hugged her, and told her it was just a dream. He was so glad she was okay. Lu replied to him not to worry, she was fine. Li told her sister that he was the reason she was in danger. Lu told her brother that it wasn't his fault. She was only in trouble because of those bastards. After all, he taught her how to make candied fruit, took her to the Palace of the Stars, where only masters of the way of literature could enter. He earned money and freed his younger sister Linlin. The care with which he treated her was forever imprinted on her heart. So even if she has to die for him, she is willing to do it. Li touched her face and said that she was the one. Lu immediately flinched and pulled away from her brother to the side. She told him that they couldn't. Lu wished him a good night and said she would go to bed too. She immediately slammed the door behind her. At this time, Li's heart was just pounding like a car engine. He was saying that he wanted to protect her, but at the same time the essence didn't hurt. And he can't feed that feeling. He has to let it out. And immediately he got the fox out and started composing a new verse called, "Oh Sky." While composing the poems, Li tried to make her sister feel it. After all, this is his love for her. The master asked Li the next day what he meant by saying that he was able to write a better poem than the new song of the branches of the poplar and willow. Li replied that this was correct. Zam asked the guy, Then why does he only want to publish it on the 6th of March? Does he even know that the March Sage list is also called the Slumbering Dragon list? And all because it is in March that all the great masters and publish their creations and give a chance to young people who have not yet had time to prove themselves. This is a great opportunity to make yourself known and climb to the top, but if he posts his creation 6 days later than the others, it may go unnoticed. His poem may be a masterpiece, but no one will see it. Lee replied that March is her birthday, and he wants her to be the first to see this poem. The deputy told the guy he was an idiot. And he's willing to do that knowing he's giving others the upper hand? Lee replied that he was. The master asked, even if his reputation would be tarnished? The guy confidently replied that yes, and to him, she is far more important than reaching the top. And he hopes the master will let him do it. The master turned to Lee and said that with his talent, he would reach the top easily enough. This moment was just around the corner. In the future, he would be able to marry the best girl in the empire. Lee replied that the daughters of a noble family, the most beautiful girl in the empire, yes, even the daughter of the emperor herself. None of them could compare to her. Lee said no girl in the world can compare to her. That settled in his heart. Sam clenched his fist and asked who the girl was. There was no mention of his lover in the teacher's letter. It only wrote about his sisters. Could it be his brother's sister-in-law? Then she is the one who is his lover? Lee replied that he would not deceive him, and it was indeed his sister. Sam said at once that it was absurd. The master also confirmed this, and said that he knew that this kind of relationship was contrary to the teachings left to him by the first saint, and if anyone found out about it, he would at best have his palace of the ways of literature destroyed, and at worst be killed. Lee replied to him that he and his sister had not broken any rules of the first saint's teachings. Let him explain. He and his brother never had a wedding ceremony. His brother and father had gone off to war shortly before, so technically they are not even married to each other. However, even after his brother left, she did not leave him alone. She cared for him for 5 agonizing years and pulled him back from the dead more than once. She had not given up on him, even though she knew the chances of his recovery were slim. He could never forget that. That's why he would never give up his feelings for her. The master said he understood. As long as his alliance did not conflict with the first saint's teachings, their academy would support his decision. Let him act as he sees fit. And then the system said that the race for the March Sage list spots had begun. The students were very excited about this moment. Here it is, the 1st of March. And it's the sales kickoff for the new installment of the book Eating Words. Pandemonium has started and people have been asking for multiple copies. When the students saw Lee ranked 20th, they were surprised. The guy said he decided to move up by capitalizing on the popularity of the book Eating Words. He's so naive. The other guy told the servant to tell all the major bookstores to go ahead with the plan. A salesman asked passers-by if they want to read 2 great books about thrilling battles and the fortitude of warriors. He thinks it's much better than the snotty ones about love stories. And yes, they have a special promotion going on today. Have them buy one of the books and the second one is given for free. The guys took the books and said all the right things. This is the kind of book that real men should read. The vendor asked the guys where they were going. Everyone was surprised how Lee's poems dropped from 20th place to 70th. On the 3rd of March, the tension was building. The girls were saying that since no one was buying them, she would. The girls said that the lines alone are like a red fruit smashing into a dice. Worth it. They are obliged to support the eating of words. A guy passing by said that yes, this poem about tragic love only they women, and will like it. I'm not surprised at all. The girls said that Lee's poems are literally imbued with tenderness and subtlety. He thought they were only slandering him because they were unable to write something so wonderful. And at once the passions between them grew hot. But after that, Lee immediately rose to the 3rd place. The masters were angry and said that their attempts to drown Lee only increased the popularity of his poem A New Song of Poplar and Willow Branches. Master said there will be no more mercy. They will completely destroy this Lee. There won't even be a mention of him left. One of the guys was saying in the study section that the March Sage list was bothering him a bit. The new song of the poplar and willow branches leaps up and down, and asked brotherly that the last lines of his poem were particularly heartfelt. Did he write them while thinking of his beloved? Lee asked. The last lines? He replied that no, they weren't. An thought he was just winding himself up. Li said he wrote her another poem. He's going to publish it in a couple of days, it's just that it's her birthday on March 6th. But then a guy came up to them and told Li that things were bad. His poem was about to be knocked off the top 100 of the Saints list. Li asked, how did this happen? The guy replied that a few masters of the Manhwa Academy had teamed up and started to deliberately defame the new song of the poplar and willow branches. The ranking of his poem was fading right before his eyes. Liu, master of the 5th stage, said that the main thought of this poem is too exhaustive, which is why it doesn't resonate anything in the heart. The author is too obsessed with the idea of love, and has a narrow view of the world because of it. If they still think he is a genius, they should not continue to follow the path of literary Tao. This poem has no place on the Saints list. And after saying that, Li's poem immediately moved up to 78th place, and got angry and asked, how dare he talk such nonsense about him? Yes, he will personally deal with them. Li replied to his brother not to get hot-tempered, and said that he didn't care if he was a master of another academy. He should get punched in the face for saying that. And immediately moved to the map, and told the masters to stop talking such nonsense. They themselves are well aware that Li's poems are real art, but they, knowing this, continue to slander him. Their malice is obvious. Li replied that they say this in the hope that Li will realize his mistakes and return to the true path of literary Tao. What malice is he talking about? And became extremely angry and attacked them. Louis said that being just a disciple, he dared to raise his hand against the master? So the teachings of the first saint meant nothing to him? The energy immediately bounced off the master's body, and was immediately directed at Anya. He couldn't dodge and received his own attack. Li managed to move in time and caught his brother. Anand told his brother to forgive him. There was nothing he could do to help him. Li said he was grateful to him for sticking up for him. As for those masters, he would deal with them himself. Li shifted and said that since the masters were trying so hard to help him get on track, he couldn't help but accept their help. Li immediately directed his true light at the masters for injuring his brother. Louis didn't expect this and felt pressured. Louis got angry and said that Li is a petty bastard. Does he not give them any credit at all? The disciples were saying at this time that they were so happy that Li had managed to suppress these pseudo-masters with his qi, and such slander dishonors all masters who follow the path of literary Tao. They should be expelled from the society of cultivators. Li told the masters that he had no reason to fight with them, dear masters. Why don't they stop these antics and wait for the results of the sage list this month? Louis replied that he thought they should take him up on his offer. If they lost to this insolent man, they would never get rid of it. They would just be laughed at. The second master also told the chief that they couldn't risk their reputation. Li asked the dear master, was he really so afraid that their poem would lose to him? Lu became very angry, but suddenly started spitting blood. Li said that his poem is about the love between a man and a woman. And he knows that the emotions he put into his lines will reach the hearts of his readers. Unlike them, he is confident in his art. The disciples were saying at this time that it was amazing. He had yet to hear of a disciple who could also provoke those masters at once. So it was March 6th and Li decided to buy a present, and wished his sister a happy birthday. Lu asked, did he remember? Wasn't it too expensive? Li replied that she didn't need to worry about that. This bracelet is engraved with a poem he dedicated to her. In fact, it is his main gift to her. Lu asked, really? It's hard to see clearly. Li replied that it was okay, then he would read it himself. Lu read his poem to her, and told her at the end that he loved her. Lu was very surprised and reciprocated. They pressed so close to each other that they were ready to kiss. But suddenly Linlun walked in and dropped her plate. She asked them what they were doing here. Lindong told them that they knew that she had liked Li's brother for a long time, didn't they? The boy tried to explain himself, but she wouldn't let him. Linlun said she didn't care. If he kissed his sister, he should kiss her too. Li was surprised to hear such words. Linlun immediately hugged her brother and kissed his cheek. She told her brother that it wasn't fair. He's willing to accept that he loves his sister more than anyone else in the world. But she should at least be second on that list. Li replied that so be it. Lu told her brother that he made this birthday the best birthday ever. Li told his sister that the day wasn't over yet. He had one more surprise for her. That same evening on the street, Lin Luan spun around and told her sister to see how many lanterns there were. The girls saw the whole thing and said that this Lu girl was the envy of the world. Did someone do all this for a birthday party? Lu told Lu that going away alone wasn't enough. He wants the whole world to know about his love for her. The next day, and asked Li, did he stay up all night having fun with his lover? And Li's brother needs to be more restrained. Li answered him not to talk nonsense, he hadn't slept through it. Yesterday, when he published the second poem, he had hoped that it would be on the list today. But it didn't turn out the way he expected, and thought those paper lanterns from yesterday were Li's doing. Did he really love her that much? On thought, who is this Lu? Li said that she has missed a whole 5 days since the start of the publication of the March Sage list, so the recognition is growing too slowly, and said that since the poem itself can't attract attention, it's worth dealing with the reputation of his immediate name. We need to make everyone know about Li. Li said that's right, and that's a great idea. And how good it is that he has Annan's brother. He's already figured out how he can raise the reputation of his name. Annan replied that he was glad he could help. Li asked his brother what he had just said. Annan was surprised and replied that it was nothing. And asked his brother what he had in mind. Li replied that he would raise his reputation with the help of the Kunwen Bureau. The next day's seller was shouting that the books came with a handwritten version of the new song of the branches of the poplar and willow tree. It would be given to each of their buyers. The girls were overjoyed and said they should get it. And let them get 2 copies for each of them. The master saw it and said it was the height of self-confidence. Does he really think his calligraphy is that good? Does he want to increase his reputation at its expense and rise higher on the saints' list? The second master replied that it was just a trick to fool only those ignorant women. The art of calligraphy requires years of honing one's skills and total immersion. The girl took the book and said that it was really Li. The guy standing next to her was numb with shock. The guy immediately took the book away and said that he had never seen such a skill before, but he was sure that it was a top-ranked shinshu. The guy asked the girl if she would like to sell him this leaf. Would it be enough for her? The girl replied that such a copy from Li himself couldn't be bought for 1,000 gold pieces. Let him go and buy the word-eating books. The masters were surprised and asked each other how it was possible. They could not believe their eyes. He is good not only in poetry but also in calligraphy. And is Li really the reincarnation of the first saint? But suddenly, Li opened the talisman and saw that it was already in the 99th place. Li said he only wanted to use it as a last resort. But with this monument, his art of calligraphy will become like Wang Shiji's. He didn't think that such skill would leave anyone indifferent. So he decided to do things differently. Guan Qingren, seeing Li climbing up the table, said that this guy has turned the love between a woman and a man into perfection. Who said that such verses can't reach the top? He Wanzhu was very upset and thought, is Li already in love with someone else? Who was this Jinan? Master Lu thought there was no way he could stop him. Where did that brat Tai Bai get such skill? Sam laughed at this time and said that Master Gu had done them a great honor by sending Chang in here. Thanks to him, Bailu Academy had a true genius. But suddenly, Li knocked on the door and asked Master Su if he was busy. Could he please spare some time for him? Su was surprised and asked, taking time off again? How long this time? A month? Maybe 2? Or even 6? Li replied to the master that he had nothing to do with it this time. His mentor sent him a letter asking him to return home as a matter of urgency. In Lin County at this time, there were a lot of people gathered. The watchers said that the exam would start soon. Let them go inside. Gu told the kid, if he could pass this exam, his name would be entered into the temple book of the list of followers of the path of literary Tao. After that, not even the great families will dare touch him. This is the only way he will be able to keep himself and his loved ones from their filthy clutches. Li replied to the elder that he understood. Gu said to tread then, and let him read the questions carefully and check his answers. Once inside, the elders told the disciples to bow to the holy altar to begin the examination. Li opened the system and saw that the temple distributes the questions completely randomly, and the questions themselves can only be seen by the students who got them. A perfectly fair approach. Sitting down at the table, Li saw that the questions were not that difficult. He thought he wouldn't have any problems with the exam. The elders said that their examination would last exactly as long as this candle burns. They can begin. The candle will burn for about 10 hours. But suddenly after a couple hours, Li raised his hands and asked the elders if he had already finished. Was he allowed to turn in his work? The elder said it's only been an hour. And he's saying he's already answered all the questions? If he lacks knowledge, let him say so, the second elder thought and said he could. Let him throw the lease with the answers into the sacred cauldron. Li threw the exam into the cauldron, and the bright light immediately showed that Li had gotten an A grade and the exam had been passed. The other students marveled and asked that he not only finished in an hour, but also passed with honors? Impossible! Absolutely impossible! This has never happened before. The elder got angry and asked the others, what kind of nonsense are they doing here? If they don't want to take the exam, then let them get out of here. And the sacred cauldron could make no mistake. They have only themselves to blame for their lack of knowledge. The elder told Li that since he had passed the exam, he could go to the palace of the first saint to inscribe his works there. Li gave thanks for such a thing and opened the doors of the room, but saw something indescribable, like another planet. Li asked, "Is this the palace of the first saint?" But an altar appeared in front of him and began to shine brightly. Li even closed his eyes, for he was blinded. But his heart immediately started pounding even harder and burning. Li felt the power of the first saint's literary chi flowing into him, and perfecting his palace of the ways of the literary Tao, but she is too powerful for him. But suddenly, two people appeared on top of him. They asked, was this the owner of the legendary Xiantian body? The other guy said that if they let him live, there would be one more great genius in the world. This guy will severely cut their chances of survival. But the first guy attacked him at once and said that they couldn't let this happen. The owner of Xiantian's body must die. Li didn't see anything and didn't even realize that someone was going to attack him. And Guy took a direct hit to the heart. Li stood up and realized that he had almost died. If he hadn't reacted in time and deviated from the trajectory of the shot, he would have been dead already. This power, it didn't feel like the power of the first sage that everything here was shrouded in. Then who was it? But when he looked up, he saw that the energy was attacking him again. And he realized that he could not survive this. The achievement of the literary Tao abruptly spun around and abruptly closed. The stranger immediately realized that he couldn't sense any imprints of the literary Tao achievement in him. Could it be that he had made a mistake? The stranger told his men to go back, for it was only a waste of time. But Li was surprised that it had stopped. It was because his jade scroll had hidden all his achievements he had gained through poems in time. And it turns out that it wasn't him, but Xiantian's blessed body. Li looked around and said that it seemed to have passed, but suddenly energy ropes enveloped him. Li didn't realize at once what was happening. An unfamiliar voice said that it was on behalf of the first saint, endowing him with a palace of literary Tao. Li replied that there was no need, he already had one. But it was already too late, for they released a strange energy into him, causing Li to be in great pain and start screaming. Li realized that apparently because his jade scroll had hidden all his achievements, the saint had mistaken him for an absolute beginner, and created another literary Tao palace within him. And it turns out that it now has two palaces. But suddenly there was a crackle of Tao energy. Li realized that once the palace emerged within the master, it was immediately inextricably linked to his life. If something happens to the new palace, it's finished. Li said it was the technique of a spark igniting the steps. Li saw the palace begin to diminish smoothly. He saw that he had succeeded. He transferred some of the chi of the jade scroll to the new palace, and it moved to a more or less stable state. But at the end of March, this month's sage list will be approved, and the accumulated chi for his 2 poems will trickle into the jade scroll. He fears that he will not be able to hand it over to the new palace in time, and it will collapse like a house of cards. He can't die like that. Li left the room and realized that he had half a month to have enough time to nourish the chi of his new palace. One of the guys headed to the Kunlun bureau and asked the man if there was something wrong with his book. The man replied that there wasn't. It's just that in their time, love novels don't sell much. Even Eating Words only became so popular because of Li's poem. He can't take that risk. The guy at this time realized that he didn't have time to unwind by offering the wine, so the only thing left was to use Liang and Zhu. The guy asked the gentleman what about him paying all the printing costs himself? The man replied that it wouldn't make any sense. Not only would he not make any money, but he would lose a lot of money. The guy said it didn't matter to him. He will print the books on account, and hope that the Kunlun Bureau will help him sell them. The Lord agreed and replied that everything would be as the Lord wanted. According to the rules set by the Academy, a minimum of 10,000 copies can be ordered. The cost of each book will be equal to 14 coins, and it will be sold at 23. The guy replied that he understood him. Then he asks him to draw up a contract for an order of 100,000 copies. He will pay the costs himself. The master told the guy that he would have to pay 1,000 taels of silver for 100,000 copies. Even if he could sell all the books, he would lose a lot of money. The guy replied that like he said he didn't care. The gentleman agreed and asked the guy to go to the office. Passers-by said upon seeing the guy that another fool who thinks he can buy fame. Does he really think that money can buy everything? After all, you can't get fame by cheating. Who cares about other people's money? Let them spend it. The master told the guy to sign this sheet here. The lad realized that he had used Li's name for the jade sitka and turned it into Tai Bai, so the same could be done to the new palace. From Li Bai to Tai Bai, which means he will now sign himself as Qing Lian, and it's all an afterthought. At this time, Li went into his talisman, and saw that he had created 2 palaces, the first under the name Tai Bai and the second Qing Lian. Li came to his senses and said that Qing Liang Palace never added to the literary qi. It is understandable, given the low sales of Liang and Zhu's book. If it goes on like this, he's definitely screwed. He won't be able to feed the new palace with the qi of his jade scroll forever. Li flopped down on the couch immediately afterward. He wondered how the first author of this story had managed to make it popular, and then he remembered that he was lucky that his story was appreciated by other famous writers of the time. After that, its popularity ignited a step fire. Li thought, what should he do? Go to the masters for help? But that would be like admitting that Qing Lian and Tai Bai were the same person. But then the words from the book would be given to Tai Bai again, and it wouldn't help him in any way. Besides, if he could rock the new palace and remain undetected, Qing Lian's identity could become his strongest hidden trump card. And suddenly a realization came into his head. He abruptly jumped up and thought, what if people started passing on the story of Liang and Zhu by word of mouth? Li headed to the brothel and told Ms. Yen that he had come to her with a request. Yen immediately replied that she agreed. Li was surprised at such how she answered him immediately, even before he asked her a question. And then Yen said that she was ready to be his. Li thanked Mrs. Yen and said that he wanted her to sing to people about the story of Liang and Zhu, from his book. But only he had one request, don't let her tell others that he wrote it. Yen was very upset, for she realized that marriage was out of the question. Li asked Yen, is something bothering her? The girl replied that everything was fine. After all, Mr. Li had saved her, so she would do anything for him. The next day, Yen went on stage and addressed her visitors saying that she wanted to sing a love story for her. Yen started singing her song to them. Everyone was shocked and asked why it ended so tragically. This story is so beautiful that it even brought tears to my eyes. The girl said sternly that if she found out who wrote the story, she would definitely beat him up. Li was greatly surprised by her words, and even he felt a little scared. She saw that Yen had conveyed the story perfectly, and her velvet voice was enviable. The effect of her song was so good that some people even hated it. Yen said she got the story for the song from the book Liang and Zhu by author Qing Liang, and she hopes they will support it. One girl asked, so is there a book on this story? And now they need to go and buy some books for their sisters. A few days later, Li walked into the talisman and said that Qing Lian Young Palace's qi had finally started to grow. But it was still not enough. We would have to pour oil on the fire after all. The next day in front of the Kunlun Bureau, the gentleman was saying that all of Liang and Zhu's books were already sold out. There weren't that many of them originally. The janitor said he didn't know that love stories were so popular nowadays. If he had known, he might have written a decent story and become a master of the literary path. The master asked the guy, did he think he was comparing himself to Mr. Qing Liang? The boy was frightened and apologized. Master said that if the rumors are to be believed, Mr. Qing Lian will become the second Tai Bai. But if he doesn't agree, they won't be able to republish Liang and Zhu by themselves, so how much money will they lose? And then the guy told the Lord that Mr. Qing Lian had arrived. The Lord immediately greeted the guy. The gentleman told the fellow that he would like to talk to him about increasing the copies of his book. Naturally, all at a reasonable price. Qing Lian agreed to talk. The gentleman said that their bureau thinks that it is possible to start with 500,000 copies of Liang and Zhu at once. Of course, nothing is required of him, and he will eventually receive 30% of the total profit from the books. Qing Lian slammed his glass on the table and said that although he was new to the field of writing, he was not a complete idiot. Did he really think he was fooling him? Qing Lian said that the gentleman offering him would barely cover the expenses he went to in order to start selling his book. However, if he splurges again and prints the same 500,000 copies himself, he can not only cover all expenses, but also earn twice as much. The master told Qing Lian that it was a very risky move, as the books might not be bought. The boy replied that he didn't need to tell him about the risks. He understood them all perfectly well. He also realizes that other stores will offer him more favorable terms. And then the gentleman offered him that 30% of sales. This is much more than profit. And then Qing Lian said before leaving that they had reached an agreement. But suddenly, someone approached him on the street. Li immediately realized that senior son wouldn't come to him without a good reason. So something had happened to their Lunghu gang already. Upon arriving at the veterans' courtyard, Li asked what happened to them. Sun replied that they had completely taken control of the Lunhu gang, but their boss, he still refused to disclose information about the dealings with the county jail chief Zhang Yingquan. The warrior led the enemy over and pulled the sack off his head. The guy immediately looked angrily at Li. The enemy began to ask the warriors if this was their leader? Some bratty scientist? The warrior immediately told him to shut his mouth. Li said that since he refused to talk, we'd have to kill him. Afterwards, they spread the information that he died while he was spending time with a girl. He is sure that after that, they will definitely come to them to make a deal with the new gang leader. The county authorities only want money. They don't care who will be the leader of the Lunghu gang. Li said their goal from the beginning was to become the guiding force of the gang, not guided puppets. Li turned to his brothers and said that now that they were rid of the threat in the form of Linghu, he was offering them a choice of 2 units. First, peaceful subdivision. No contact with their future endeavors, will run their business honestly, make money and perhaps soon have a loving family. The second, the spy unit. Those who chose this path would have to continue to hide their identities and secretly monitor the actions of the Lunghu gang. Li said that the specific details of the assignments would be discussed after they were chosen, so let them decide. The warriors asked if they were really going to have a normal life. Li said that he himself realized that the spies would have a hard time, so he prepared some additional conditions for them. First things first. Depending on the quality of the completed mission, spies will receive various rewards, ranging from money, weapons, and ending with heavenly treasures. He had set up a school at his own expense for the children of all the members of the spy unit, and those who would distinguish themselves with the talent to study the literary Tao, he made sure to get them into their academy. Sun said that, frankly, the warriors don't know much about trading and doing business. They had better think hard about their children's future. The warriors said that Big Brother Sun is right, he would better perform in the spy unit. And Mr. Li is so kind to them. He and his brothers are very lucky that he decided to move to their county. Sun called them Lord and asked them, did they forget how they should address their Lord? Come on, all of you. And immediately they all thanked him together. Li said that in that case, they would no longer act on behalf of the Lunghu gang. He would give them a new name. Mankind was born almost 10,000 years ago, and the Han dynasty, before which the whole world bowed, more than 5,000 years ago. Henceforth they will be known as the Han dynasty. The next day at the market the vendor was shouting that he had candied fruit on a stick on sale. And they're also selling hot malatin, the best dish in all of Lin County. But the owner of the bureau was telling people to look at this marvelous calligraphy technique. Qing Liang and Zhu's Rising Star masterpiece is back on sale. When the master heard such words, he said that the head of the Kunlun Bureau must have gone completely out of his mind. Why did he take up this cheap love story by an unknown author? The second master replied that they seemed to be doing quite badly. And he congratulated Senior Zhang. It won't be long before he would be done with this bureau. Li heard their words and thought, what are they talking about? Li thought for a moment, and decided that they were right about something. There was still too little spiritual aura coming from Liang and Zhu. That meant that he needed to push on somehow. Li then headed to Bailu Academy and upon seeing Brother Annan said he had a gift for him. Annan surprised him and asked him where he had been for a few days. He came back with a gift. Li pulled a gift out of his pocket, and Annan was surprised and asked, "A book?" Li replied that he kind of liked his new song of the poplar and willow branches, so he brought something similar. Annan opened the book and immediately realized that it was a book about a girl dressing up as a guy to enter the academy. Li told Brother Ziyu that he had brought one book for him too. The boy replied to his brother that he shouldn't have. Annan asked his brother why he brought him that particular book. Li replied that he just thought he would like it. He realized that what he really wanted was for his brother to show him that Psy Girl's book and help him gain more readers. What was he even thinking? Ziyu told Brother Li that he too thought their Annan looked a bit like a girl dressed up as a guy. That's why he gave him Liang and Zhu's book, right? It's like he's Liang Shanbao and he's Zhu Yingtai. Annan got angry and told them to cut the crap. Li replied that if anything, Liang Shanbao's role was more suited to him. He and Brother Annan always go together. Annan got angry and kicked Brother Li's leg with his foot. The guy told his brother that it was too much. Annan replied to him that if he didn't stop rambling he would gladly give up their friendship. Did he understand? Ziyu lifted the book and asked Annan in surprise, would he really give up his friendship? Let him stop being different and become a lover. Did Brother Li bring this book to Annan to confess his feelings to him? Annan got really angry and told them all to shut up. Li saw this and thought he had managed to spin the book a bit. At this time, the girl threw down the book and said that Brother Li had given her this book, and she thought he would be interested in such a thing. Annan replied that he didn't expect that all the local girls had already managed to read it. The girl replied that that was not all. The sisters said that Mrs. Yen from the brothel on Tunler Street had started singing songs based on the book. Tomorrow they will go to her next performance. Annan thought it wasn't far from where Brother Li lived. The girl told the Lord that he should go there too. He might meet his Liang Shanbao. Annan asked, what other Liang Shanbao? That's a male character. The girl asked, isn't Mr. Tai by his Liang Shanbao? Annan started splashing her with water and asked Kai, when did she get so bold as to mock her master? The girl asked Mr. Annan if he would go. The boy thought for a moment and replied that he would see. Li asked Miss Yen if she was looking for him. Yen turned around rejoiced and replied that the master had returned. And yes, she came to him because she wanted to change some lines in the song about Shu and Liang. And she's asking for help with advice. Li read it and replied that it was just beautiful. Yes, the meaning is a little distorted in some places, but it sounds very good. Li told Ms. Yen that she was incredibly talented. With such aptitude for literature, she should try her luck at the next county exam. Yen replied that no, he's just flattering her. And she hoped he would come tomorrow to hear the new version of the song. Li replied that he would definitely come. Li was surprised and thought what a smart girl. Too bad she had to sing in a brothel to make a living. Maybe there was something he could do to help her. But then Linlun came in and asked her brother who the girl was. Does he miss her and his sister? Lu tells Li that if he really likes her, they need to find a matchmaker. Li replied that no, it was just a misunderstanding. There is nothing between them. Did Linlong tell his brother to swear that he didn't like her? But Li began to hesitate and fell silent. Linlun let out a tear and said that she knew it. Linlun started to say that it's obvious that the brother likes this Yen girl and the brother likes her. What about Linlun and the sister? And now the brother has to give her a baby. Linlun started pushing her brother with stubbornness. Lu asked for his sister to help him too. But Lu answered her brother to fulfill her request. Linlun stubbornly placed him on the sofa. Li asked his sister if she could wait for a while. Linlong said that her sister is very gentle and kind, and Mrs. Yen is talented in literature. She alone has nothing. But if she gives her brother a baby, she too will gain value in his eyes. Li grabbed Linlong's hand and abruptly flipped her underneath him, and said that he didn't need any good reasons to love her. Linlun told her brother that he only says that because he knows how to push her. Li curled her up in a blanket and told her she would sleep like this tonight. If she tried to throw anything out, he would get very angry. It would be safer for both of them. The next day in front of the stage people were yelling for no one to push. But Ms. Yen was about to start singing about Liang and Zhu. Annan also came to the concert, and suddenly the girl pushed him. By this time Li came and caught him and asked him if he was okay. Anan, seeing his brother, said, "What a coincidence, he also came to hear about Liang and Zhu." Li saw that senior son knew his business. Ling Hu's gang had changed beyond recognition. We should give him a raise. But suddenly a guy came to him and told Li that Ms. Yen said he was allowed to watch the performance backstage. Anan asked his brother, "Another soulmate?" It seemed he had too many chosen ones. Li saw that his brother was the same way. He didn't think it would go this far. Li saw that Qing Lian's fame was growing, and the strength of his literary Dao palace was growing with it. Li saw that Ms. Yen was an excellent performer. It was only because of her that he was able to achieve such results. Qing Lian's palace had become noticeably stronger, but it still had a long way to go before the strength of Li Taibai's palace. Li came to the inner spiritual world and said that at the end of this month the saints' list would be summarized and his life would depend on the results. But all of a sudden, the spirit world suddenly attacked him and released a huge energy into Li's body. The monument began to crack dramatically and Li saw that there was too much qi. And at this rate, he would just die. Li decided to use the spark techniques of the igniting degree. He saw that it wouldn't be enough. He was expending far less qi than he was receiving. If things continued like this, he wouldn't even make it back to reality. Li was lying on the ground, slowly dying, but the energy didn't stop and continued to invade the guy's body. And after that he began to form. Li immediately moved into his life and lying on the ground could barely breathe. But when he got down on one knee, he realized he was barely alive. He was completely covered in blood and even traces were left behind after he walked. He realized that the Jade Scroll had once again saved him. Walking outside, Zhang asked his brother what happened to him. Li replied that there was too much qi literary Dao, a little couldn't he take it. Zhang told the guy to hurry up and follow him. We need to attend to his wounds. But the guy showed his strength and replied that they weren't going anywhere. Zhang was completely shocked and asked, "Palace envoy?" The guy replied that he had come here to take Tai Bai to the capital. Zhang said to forgive him then, but his tower master ordered him not to leave this county for now. Besides, even if he had to go there, he could handle it himself. There's no need for them to personally oversee it. The guy called him a fool and asked him how dare he talk to him like that. Zhang immediately fell to his knees. Zhang ordered Anan to get Brother Li out of here. He immediately used the rash whirlwind technique. The guy called them fools and asked if they were running away, and attacked with the technique of 10,000 arrows stabbing into the heart. But Zhang stood in front of them and used the shield technique. Anan immediately saw this and was scared for the deputy. Zhang told them to get out of here as soon as possible, and tell them to go to the academy. It would be safe there. Immediately, they disappeared. The guy grabbed Zhang by the throat and asked, what did he do? They had escaped, and he would have to take the blame. And now he's going to kill him. Zhang replied to him to just follow his orders. The guy said that in that case, he could go to hell proudly. But suddenly, someone attacked this guy, preventing him from killing Zhang. And immediately his big foot stepped on him. Wang Tianyang asked him if they had completely lost their minds, as he could see. When did he become the ruler of Zhushan, huh? Zhang saw the man and called him a master. The guy looked surprised and asked Wang Tianyang. The guy told Wang that he hadn't been able to reach the second stage yet, so why the hell did he leave the saint's temple? Van sat on him and asked how the brat had just addressed him. Not only by name, but in such a rude manner. Van could not contain such disrespect in himself, and pressed the lad down even more with his weight. Wang said to the guy, could he tell me if he was from a family connected to Bailu Academy there? Wang clutched the talisman and shouted to the head to help him. And in a moment his talisman shattered in his hand. The head immediately appeared in front of him and told Wang to stop right now. They are doing this for Li's own good. Wang replied that that was it, so their Sichuan family was behind all of this. The head replied that he had received a secret report a couple days ago. As it turned out, the other 3 academies had recently held a secret meeting among themselves. They never managed to find out what they were talking about there, but he's sure the other academies are plotting something against their studently. He had already won the Saints list twice, so he must have managed to earn a not-so-good reputation in their circles. So let him leave his subordinate alone and let them protect him. Wang immediately pushed the guy with his foot and asked the head, protect? It's more like captivity. Li is a true young dragon in terms of his brilliance, and also the hope of their Bailu Academy. He won't let them ruin his potential. Anyone who dares to attack Li will have to deal with him. In the academy management, the girls said that Li was in no condition to take the medicine right now, she just wouldn't swallow it. The girl took the cup and said she would do it herself. Immediately she drank it herself. After that, she touched her lips to Li's lips with her own, and slowly let the medicine enter his body. The girl said that the medicine from the golden fruit issued by the deputy tower master was really good. The wounds healed right before their eyes. The girl said that Mr. Li was indeed very lucky that it was she, the madam, who volunteered to take care of him. He's really lucky. Dee slowly opened his eyes and seeing the girl tried to remember. The girl told Blondie to stop talking nonsense. Li was immediately completely immersed in his subconscious, and he thought he had seen her somewhere before. Li decided to move to Qing Lian's literature palace. He said that his qi was barely enough to travel to his spirit world through the Ghost Gate, but he has enough literary qi accumulated here to pass the exam and ascend to the 8th stage. But until the power of Qing Lian Palace equals that of Taibai Palace, he will not post any work on behalf of the latter, and decided to see what other works of earthly authors could be used to strengthen Qing Lian Palace. Li unearthed the ability, and said it was what he needed. The guy recovered and said that he was thankful for saving Brother Anan. He doesn't even know how he can repay him for it. Joe asked Li if he could pay with his body. Li told him to stop talking such nonsense. Anan told him that if he said any more nonsense like that, and he would shut his rotten mouth. Li was saying at the table that he heard that there was a fierce battle in the north again. Is this true? Anan replied that it was better to ask Brother Joe about it. He knew more than anyone else what was going on there. Joe said that their defense line did break through, causing 100,000 of their warriors to be trapped in the Demon Kingdom. General Hu Wei, his father, had already started preparations to send reinforcements. Li asked General Hu Wei is his father? Then he had forgotten at the academy? He had said himself that he wanted to study martial arts rather than the path of literature. Besides, it turns out his father is a real general. Why is he still studying here? Zhou replied that, frankly speaking, his father believes that the path of martial arts has no future, which is why he sent all 7 of his sons to learn the literary Tao. But he has absolutely no interest in it, so he is still trying to insist on his own way. Zhou told them not to talk about it. And speaking of which, a couple of days ago, the head of literature of the empire had appealed to all the citizens to write poems on military topics, in order to gather enough literary qi to help the soldiers in this great war. Zhou asked Brother Li if he had time to write something. What is he going to impress everyone with this time? Li replied that he hadn't written anything yet. Zhou asked surprised, he didn't write? It turns out he won't be involved in this? Li replied that was correct. Zhou told Brother Li, after all, he had just recently snagged some pretty famous masters. They would definitely latch on to his inaction and start ruining his reputation. Li replied that so be it, he didn't care at all. He wants to take good care of his health first. Zhou wanted to say something else, but Anan immediately covered his mouth with an apple and told him not to forget that Brother Li was still a couple hours away from his death. The bureau salesman asks Mr. Qing Lian, has he really written another great book on love? He is afraid if Qing writes another book of the same quality, he will have to start calling him a mentor. Qing Lian replied that no, the master misunderstood him. This time he decided to write. And then the salesman asked, about martial arts surprised? The vendor told the gentleman that he thought they had made a slightly wrong choice. It had been a long time since anyone in their empire had been interested in martial arts. They had been replaced by the path of literary Tao. They will only be able to sell a maximum of 100,000 copies. Compared to Liang and Zhu's book, whose sales reached almost 3 million copies, it's just not profitable for both him and them. Li replied that he didn't write about the path of martial arts. He wrote to make him believe him. That's totally different. If the master wouldn't agree to such a thing, he would find someone who would dare to take this step. The master opened the door and told Qingyu that it was their bureau chief Kunwen, and then the leader told Qin that they were all here for his martial arts book alone. He hoped that he would not disappoint them. Qing immediately realized that it was a projection technique. He immediately threw down the sheets and said that they would figure it out for themselves when they read it. The supervisor read it, and said with surprise that he never would have thought martial arts could be written about in such a way. The leader presented this story live, and seeing a warrior with a spear in front of him screamed and asked for help. The warrior was immediately thrown back. And that warrior was Guijing. He was a hero who serves his country and his people, not one who kills thousands for his own sake. The leader said that hatred for enemies, love for his homeland, no one has ever described all these feelings so colorfully and vividly. Qin asked them how they felt about this. The leader replied that they were definitely willing to sign a contract for the book Legend of the Condor Heroes. The manager said they would print 600,000 copies at once. This book is an exception to their rules. He is sure it will be a hot new product very soon. Qin took a step towards the leader and said that he hoped for a good cooperation. The supervisor asked the guy, did he want something? Qin retracted his hand and replied that it was nothing, just let them forget. Li came to Wang's residence afterward and said he was grateful for the help he had received that day. Wang replied that the guy smelled like blood. Had he managed to kill someone yet? Li was surprised that he understood everything, then asked the guy how many people he had killed. It didn't look like it was an assignment from the academy. So it happened before coming here? Does the government know about it? Li replied to the gentleman that he must be joking. One said that there was nothing wrong with killing. If, of course, he had the chi to do it. One immediately made a jump and disappeared. Li was greatly surprised and wondered where he had disappeared to. Wang immediately got behind the guy and told him to freeze. Li at this time felt that he couldn't move. He felt like a pitiful cricket caught in the mighty paws of a tiger. Wang told Li that it would be better if he inhaled deeply and held his breath. Otherwise, he would die. Van saw that the guy wasn't bad. Still holding on, even though he was about to pass out. He told Li not to breathe, not much time left. Wang told the guy that he didn't know where he had gotten this way, but there was a bunch of hidden damage in his meridians. Yes, because of the difference in cultivation, his chi might hurt him, but this was the only way he could heal quickly and continue his improvement. Except it's not all up to him. He will pour his chi into him, but he will have to at least keep it inside his spiritual veins. Otherwise, it will try to escape and will only harm his meridians more. One said it was done, and now he could breathe. Li sank down on his hands and was breathing hard, but he thanked the elder. One said that this elephant and dragon exploits technique belongs to martial arts. It perfectly strengthens his body and spirit, while giving him incomparable strength. He, unlike others, understands the importance of combining martial arts and literary Dao cultivation. If he learns this technique, he will no longer have to worry about his meridians while absorbing large amounts of literary chi. Li replied that it was cool and he hadn't even thought about it. One said that it was very good, then he appreciated the technique of elephant and dragon feats. Since that's the case, then vouchsafe to start practicing already. And yes, Li had ranked first on the Saints list for March, so the Academy gave him the opportunity to choose 4 items from its treasury. 3 of them he took for himself in exchange for his technique and his training. Li asked in surprise, as many as 3 treasures? Isn't that too much? Vaughn asked him, was he dissatisfied with something? Others wouldn't even get his technique for 10 treasures. Li replied that no, he was very pleased. Disciple Li thanked the elder from the bottom of his heart for his kindness and generosity. As he began practicing, Vaughn said he needed to understand the breathing exercises of this technique first. Let him watch carefully. Vaughn took a deep breath and was immediately followed by a sharp exhale, and released his chi. Li saw this and realized that this technique was truly unbelievable. So much power in just one breath. Vaughn replied that a dragon has no equal in water and an elephant on land. This technique unites their might into a single whole. He will not demand quick results, so once he has learned to inhale for as long as 1 stick of incense burns and exhale the same amount, the next step can begin. Li was surprised that it even sounded like something unreal. Are humans really capable of such a thing? A few hours later, one punched Li and asked him why he had to open his mouth so wide. He should go to the pigsty and ask his pig brothers how they managed to breathe through their nose and mouth at the same time. Vaughn covered his mouth and wondered if he'd heard that, or if he'd really snored. Why, he's the most untalented student he's ever had. After a while, Vaughn said that Li could do it whenever he wanted. Let him exhale now. Li told the elder that he would go then. One remembered and replied that he had forgotten to tell him something. One replied that there was no way he could indulge in carnal pleasures until he reached the 6th stage of Yuanyang. Li immediately introduced his sisters and marveled that he needed to reach the 6th stage. It would be a real torture. Upon entering the house, Li said he was home. Lu immediately greeted him. Linlong told his brother that could he please explain to them where he had been missing for the past few days. Lu told her sister that she herself knows that Li is busy with very important things, so let her not distract him for nothing. Lin Luan replied to her sister that all they did was sit at home all day waiting for her brother. It was really boring. Li realized that he was really bored and had neglected them. At first he was afraid that someone would reveal his new identity, and they would come after him, so he asked them to keep a low profile. But things are different now. They had already passed the district exam and were under the protection of the academy. At last the people he cared about could begin to live openly and freely. Li asked the younger one what she would like to do. He would try to fulfill her wish. Lindong got excited and asked, "Really?" Lin Luan replied to her brother that she would like to do the very thing so that her brother would give her and her sister a child each. Then they definitely wouldn't be bored. Li replied that no, they would hold off on that for now. Suddenly he said that he had just had a great idea. The girls immediately looked at him intently. Li started cooking and threw some flowers into the cauldron. And that wonderful smell spread all over the famine. Lin Luan said, "What a fragrance! It smells 100 times more delicious than the middle of a field of flowers in bloom." Lu also said she felt like she was one with the flowers. "It feels incredible," Li said. "It's called perfume. A special water that can retain some kind of fragrance for a long time. Like the smell of flowers. And he suggests they open a perfume store. And it's only April, so they won't be able to collect many different colors. But closer to summer there will be a lot more, and they will be able to establish stable production and sales. In addition, there are many shops in the neighborhood with powder and blush. You can also buy them and even open a simple beauty salon." But these were all small things. He would take care of them himself. Lin Luan hugged her brother and said that he was the best. Lu also said how lucky they were to have him. In the capital of Kunlun Bureau, a kid shouted to Master Yu that things were not good at all. Yu said, "Stop yelling like a crazy person. Let him explain normally what happened there." The guy replied that as many as 13 writers their bureau had a contract with were here to cancel it. And then the writers said to Yu, which means he decided to bet everything on that upstart Qing Lian? Then good luck to them. But he's not going to become a stepping stone to his elevation. It's unheard of for 3 bureau chiefs to use the projection technique at once and then contract for 600,000 copies of a martial arts book. It's just a spit in their faces, and if Mr. Yu doesn't terminate his contract with Qing Liang, they will do it themselves. Let the master choose, either the 13 masters that bring him money or that upstart Qing. Yu apologized to the esteemed lords and said that their Kunlun Bureau could not refuse to cooperate with Mr. Qing. They believe they can sell at least 1.5 million copies of his new book. And even more, they are almost certain that it will be the most popular talking book of the year. Master asked, 1.5 million? Master, you must be joking. But they can also boast such achievements. It can't be called something outstanding. In his opinion, it would not be enough to climb to the top of their talking books. Let him not deceive himself. You replied that Mr. Qing's new work is a martial arts story of over 1 million characters. You saw the silence in response, and said that since they couldn't be persuaded by this, he offered them a bet. He bet that Mr. Qing's book would rise to the top of the list. If he loses, he will pay each of them 5,000 taels of silver. If he wins, they gentlemen will not break their contracts with their bureau. Master asked you if he was mad? But he agrees to do it. You realized that his life was now entirely in Qing's hands. Immediately shaking hands, they automatically made a bet. Meanwhile, Li was in his treasure room. He said he now needed treasures for both the martial arts and the path of the literary Tao. It's a hard choice, but it is now his duty to strengthen Qing Lian's Palace of Literature, lest it collapse under the onslaught of Tai Bai Palace's achievements. He should only allocate treasures that exude literary qi. Automatically, he identified the treasure he wanted. Li immediately spotted the treasure, but water treads water. Li said that this technique is similar to his spark burning steps technique. Just what we need. He chooses the technique of water sharpening stone, and used the spark that ignites the steps against him. But suddenly in the moment, one asked him if he had already chosen the treasure? Then let him fly out, stop wasting time. Vaughn asked the guy how his training is going. Has he made any progress on his breathing yet? He feels like he hasn't. Lee told the master that meant he was the one responsible for keeping their academy's treasury safe. Now he could see why he had been thrown out the same way last time. Vaughn asked him who told him he had time to chat. Lee replied that he was on his way to practice. A few days later, people were already shouting that the famous writer Qing Lian had released a new book. It's a story about the difficult life of a follower of the martial arts path. Over 1 million characters. Did the guys ask if Qing Lian is the one written by Liang and Zhu? The martial arts book doesn't have tedious descriptions of those very arts. He doesn't believe it. Li walked by and thought, why did they make this noise? How good it is that none of these people know that he is this Qing Lian. A salesman shouted that Qing's new book The Legend of Condor Heroes was on sale. One buyer asked how Qing managed to stretch a martial arts book into 1 million characters, but one of the buyers replied to him that he would not advise him to buy it. It's a martial arts book, boring as hell, the guy asked in response. Then why was the Kunlun Bureau advertising it so heavily? At least to quench their curiosity. The guy replied, who knows? Maybe the head of the bureau has gone crazy in his old age. And then the guy put 40 coins on the table and said he'd start with the first part. And if he didn't like it, he wouldn't touch his books again in his life. The guys said they would take the first part too. Lee saw the whole thing and realized they were selling piecemeal. That's not a bad idea. That way people can at least figure out what to expect from the story, but something tells him that already tomorrow they will regret their decision. The customers started reading and they liked it a lot, and wanted to buy the second part. The guy runs out of the house screaming that he needs to buy the rest of the parts right away. He hopes there's not already a queue, but suddenly someone pushed him, and he asked why the man was pushing? He was just going to the bookstore. The guy replied that's why he pushed. Can't he see there's a line? Everyone wants to buy a new book. People said who would have thought a book about martial arts could be so interesting. And someone said no, it's not martial arts. Qing called it the wuxia genre. But the second buyer replied that he didn't care what it was called, he wanted the other parts. The vendor told customers that their stall only had 800 copies but they had already sold out. The guy asked him, how could they let this happen? It's a masterpiece. 800 copies is too few. Qing shouldn't have done business with the Kunlun Bureau in the first place. Incompetent idiots. The seller replied that the new books will arrive in 3 days at the most. They will be able to buy them very soon. The guy was very upset because he realized that he should have bought all the parts at once. Now he hates himself. Lee came to his brothers and said he had a gift for them, and showed them all his books. Zhou was happy and said that this was the Legend of the Condor Heroes, and that this book could not be found in the whole county now. How did he get it? Annan asked. Who was the last set for? Lee replied that he wanted to read it himself. Annan said he didn't believe it. Is it for his sister? Or was it for Miss Yen? Lee immediately realized that his brother had hit it right on the mark. Lee realized that Annan never ceased to amaze him. He immediately realized that he had saved the last set for Miss Yen, but he can't tell him he's only doing it to publicize his book. Annan grabbed him and told him he had a crush on her. Zhou decided to intervene and told his brother that although they were brothers, they might each have secrets. Or is he jealous? Annan replied that it was nonsense. Zhou told Brotherly that he needed to have a good talk with him. Annan asked his brother, would he really not be on the April Saints list? Lee replied that he just felt he shouldn't draw too much attention to himself right now. He would sit in the shadows for a while. Annan said that apparently Brotherly will have to flounder in the 9th stage for a long time. Without high places on this list, he will not break through yet. Lee asked in surprise, what? Annan replied that he heard everything correctly. Right now, only he and Brother Zhou were sitting at the 9th stage. But he was about to break through, so only he would be left. Lee thought, so what if he was twice at the top of the Saints list? So what if he made so much noise in literary circles? None of this matters, for on bare power he is still trash. He feels like he's just learned a terrible secret. Lee grabbed Annan. The guy asked him, what did he want? Lee asked, how else besides getting on the Saints list can you break through to the next stage quickly? Annan replied that there was actually one way. The Dragon Gate exam will be held in June. Dragon Gate is a grand event that has only been held in the main courtyard of the Empire's capital until now, but this year, it was decided to create Dragon Gate branches around the world to reach out to more talents. The event consists of 9 competitions of etiquette, music, archery, horseback riding, counting, verbal battle, knowledge of laws, and martial arts. Every Jinshan Academy had already received every possible reward given to the winner of the Dragon Gate. Heavenly and earthly treasures, various martial arts techniques, and just plain preciousness. And thanks to such a gift of fate, you can not only break through to a new stage, but immediately climb to the very top. Lee asked, "Why is the Dragon Gate called an exam?" "It's just a free treasure giveaway." Anon replied that to tell the truth, in previous years there were no such incredible awards, only this year something was heavily lavished. Lee was surprised, and thought, just this year? It sounds suspicious, like some kind of trap. Maybe this trap was set for him. This is getting a little paranoid. No one would go to that much trouble for him alone. But suddenly someone with a foot flew right into Lee's face, and knocked him out. The guys asked him if he was alive. Vaughn said that Lee was a slacker, taking his breath away again. He's never had such a mediocre student before. Quickly send him to additional training. Lee thought at that moment, what the hell did it matter if the Dragon Gate turned out to be a trap or not? He should at least live to see it first. Vaughn decided to bring him to his senses, and brought him to the lake. After that, he immediately put his head in the river. Vaughn looked at him and said, "That's a different matter." Now he was at least able to hold out a stick of incense. The guys were telling Huang not to worry so much. Here he would see, soon this Qing's popularity would go down drastically, it was simply inevitable. Then he will rise to the top of the rankings again. The other guy said it was like that too. This guy decided to go into the martial arts, and signed his own death warrant. These guys don't stay afloat for long. He can see for himself his mediocrity. "Mister, you sent him one part of his book. Words are not enough." Juan told the guy to give the book here. But then a girl came running to him, and asked him if any book was more interesting than hers. It's a beautiful spring night, so they could. But Juan didn't like that and pushed her with his hand and told her to move away. Juan opened the book and was totally focused on it. The boy asked him how he liked the legend of the Condor heroes. Juan replied that he was indeed better than him. Not only him, but them along with everyone who is present here. They are all nothing compared to Qing Liang. In the dark night, Li started sneezing. Vaughn asked him, did he have a cold? Li replied that no, he just had an itch. Vaughn said he thinks the guy has had enough rest. Time to continue his training. Li started to run away and shouted that it was very late, and his sisters were waiting for him at home and were worried. But Vaughn catches him and tells Li that no, he's not leaving here until he holds out a whole stick of incense. At that time, people were knocking at the bureau and telling the craftsman to open the door, to stop hiding there. So the order was accepted, but they refused to print the book normally. Have them print more copies of the Legend of the Condor Heroes book now. Otherwise they'll blow the doors off. The guy told Mr. Yu that many of their about book stalls have exactly the same situation right now. People are demanding more copies of Writer Qing's book. Yu replied to the guy to print 2 million extra copies. But the voice transmission talisman said that wouldn't be enough. Young Master Jiao told them to print 5 million copies at once. Furthermore, let them use any methods and means but to force Qing Lian to continue to cooperate with their Kunwen Bureau. You asked the young master if it was too risky to print 5 million copies at once? Jia asked surprised, too risky? Let him not talk nonsense. Perhaps even that won't be enough. His Majesty the Emperor himself ordered, and used the legend of the Qing Condor heroes to gather martial arts chi that their warriors would use during the upcoming battle. If things continued like this, he was sure that Qing Lian would become the Empire's most popular writer very soon. Vaughn told the guy that his clothes are falling apart as he sees them. Here, let him get a new set. Li took the garment and thanked, but suddenly it was very heavy and he collapsed with it. Vaughn started laughing and said that he forgot to warn, he had weighted the mold a bit, so now it weighed all 200 jing. But suddenly, Li started using ugly words. Vaughn immediately turned around and asked him what he had said. Li replied that he was very lucky to have them, great craftsmen. Vaughn said that's great, have him put on his uniform and continue practicing the breathing method. If he can do well in this outfit as well, he will teach him the first stance of the word and dragon feet technique. Coming to the 9th tower, Li was completely exhausted, and it was very hard for him. But suddenly, Zhou came up to him and said hello. Zhou touched him on the back, and Li immediately fell to the ground. They were surprised and didn't understand what was wrong with him. Li collapsed on top of Brother Anan and said that he smelled nice. The guy immediately removed his hands and let him collapse. Li asked him why he did that. Anan replied, to teach a little lesson. Let him stop with the jokes already. Zhou said that he understood that his brother was a lover, but he had to be careful. If he continues like this, he won't live to be old. Li replied that that was how he got it all wrong. It was all because of the master's harsh training and the new weighted exercise. Just so they know, he's now 200 pounds overweight. Anyway, another stupidity. Anan asked him, so will he be on next month's saints list? Li replied that he didn't think so. Zhou at this time said that of course brother would participate. Those masters who had declared brotherly a couple months ago were now particularly animated. They started accusing him of being timid and insecure. Supposedly he was inferior to the rising star Qing in everything. Did Li see that they thought Qing Lian and Li Taibai were competing? That would be like beating themselves up. And then Li told them that he would think about it. Upon arriving in town, Li was met by a guy and told that they Wang Fuji introduces him to their new restaurant. Let them come in and don't be shy to buy something. Li said that he and his brothers did a very good job. And by the way, Uncle Zhang, in a couple of days, his sister's cosmetics store will open on their street. Could he please ensure their safety? Zhang replied that they agree. What is this about? It's his and his brother's job. And it seems that Ms. Yen is here again. This girl comes here every day hoping to meet him. Li replied that he should ask her to come to his room. And then Yen came in and said that it was just her imagination, or was he really avoiding her lately? He even decided to betray his next book through someone else's hands. Did she do something wrong? Li replied to Ms. Yen that no, she had done nothing wrong. He realized that he needed to clear up any misunderstandings with her. Yen said that she knew she didn't have any outstanding looks, and understood that Mr. Li's gaze couldn't latch on to someone like her. Yen said that she just wants to stay by his side and she would do anything. If only he would love her. She immediately hugged him from behind. Li asked her what she was doing. Let her stop. Yen immediately kissed him that the guy didn't even realize how it happened. Yen told the master that she was now convinced that he still appreciated her. Li replied that he did and replied that only from now on they should avoid rash actions. Yen said that only if he promises her that he won't hide from her anymore. Li replied that he would promise.